Hi, and welcome to Magic Numbers. This is episode number 159, and don't ask me how I know it. And today we have a special one. As always, just before the set is being released, we are assembling from the lesser bones and from the prime bones a skeleton crew of, I guess, anarchists, judging by how the preparation process is running. This week we do have Tresio. Tresio, please do introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. Based on the comments from last time, I need to say more words. So I'm very glad to be joining for this particular skeleton crew. Happy to have done some work on some slides, and I have started streaming as of the last set. So you'll be able to follow that later. There's a plug for something, Circo. I should be streaming on the early access on Wednesday. And so you can come and catch me there, twitch.tv/Tresio.
Exactly. We also have Sam Pratt, also known as Sam.
Yep, that's me. I am a limited sicko and recently started a podcast called Rough Drafts about magic, limited magic specifically, and I'm happy to be here.
And we are happy to have you. The podcast is one of the best things that happened in Limited since the Sliced Bread podcast that was popular in the mid-90s. So do give it a listen if you still don't have it in your feed. And we do have Jason Yee.
Hello, I've been here the whole time, except last time. I don't know. I sometimes play Magic.
Sometimes. How many hours a week will be sometimes?
Well, I'm just finished taking a break from Magic, and I'm excited to go to space or something. Hopefully.
Be honest, you're just testing Modern, aren't you?
Well, no, I haven't touched Modern yet. I want to be a limited specialist. I got a limited specialist record at the last PT, 3-0 into 0-5.
Nice.
So I'm a limited specialist confirmed.
And there's me, which you should know if you're listening to that podcast, so I'll skip that one. I do have sponsors, which are patrons, and they're awesome, but let's leave it at that. And as I said, we have a skeleton crew. And for those of you that don't know what a skeleton crew is, well, it's not only a ramshackle assembly of limited players that want to share their ideas. It is a philosophy of running a set review. We don't go through all the cards and grade them and leave you with those grades to do what you please. We want to share a vision of what we think this format is going to be about. And Limited usually happens by playing decks against other decks. And that's why our set review is not only eccentric, but also deck-centric, where we build our decks based on simple rules. And you can find those rules here. We can have like between 0 and 2 rares in them, 0 to 10 total uncommons, and then fill up the deck with commons with maximum 2 of each. And these are guidelines. I'm pretty sure some of those decks are going to stray dramatically from those guidelines and will include 4 gene pollinators. For example, I'm just giving random examples of cards that might appear in multiples. But it is to look at the set before it's released from the perspective of how do we think those cards work together? How do we think that those decks will be working out together? And adding this kind of context and trying to guess this context positions you a bit better in those early days, because you don't know that, oh, this is a good removal. It's probably like a B+. You start thinking about, oh, I think that green-black, even though it says graveyard on the what WotC designed for it, might be actually playing out as a slightly different deck, because we looked at all the cards and we tried to figure out what synergies are there, and maybe it will play out slightly different than what is advertised on the tin or on the inside leaflet of the pre-release kit. Before we go into that, we normally start with a bit of like overview of the set so that you get a decent idea of what's going on in it. And the first slide of that is usually looking at the damage-based removal and how does it align with other sets. So first of all, there is plenty of damage-based removal in this set. We cover the range, like realistically, we covered the range from 2 to 6. There is no dedicated spell that deals 1 damage, But there's also not that many cards that have 1 toughness. There's like 20% of them across all the rarities. And Nova Hellkite, a mythic dragon, or is it a rare dragon, whatever, is 1 card that can pink something for 1, which is probably not something that you should be playing around when you cast your X1 creature. So don't worry about losing them to a specific removal that is aimed at them. There is several spells. There are several spells that can deal with creatures with 2 toughness, and Tragic Trajectory is one of them. It's a spell that is a bit more flexible than just giving -2/-2, but its first mode is give -2/-2 to something, and that will kill around 50% of common creatures, which is roughly on par with the average for regular sets. It does have another option of giving -10/-10 to something, and that will kill most creatures. Just to give you a piece of information that may be useful, when I was calculating those, I did not take the spacecrafts into account. So this only looks at creatures that are creatures when you cast them, and it looks at their nominal power and toughness that is printed on the card. It does not look at any counters or anything like that. Then we have spells that can deal 3 damage. There's, again, a couple of those, and Dubious Delicacy is one of them. That one gives -3/-3. That would kill 70% of commons and uncommons and around half of the rares. One thing in the set, there are, I think, fewer creatures than in your regular set. It's around 134, around 134, 140 creatures in total. Last set had around 160, 165. So there's definitely fewer. And specifically at the higher rarities, there are much fewer creatures than in Final Fantasy. So that's something to keep in mind. Then we have Bombard. That's a 3-mana instant that can deal 4 damage to target creature. That will kill around 7 and 8 creatures. So 87, 88% of commons and uncommons, around 80%. So 4 and 5 rare and mythic rare creatures will be killed by that, which is not terrible for 3 mana, to be fair. And then we have like things that deal 5 damage, invasive maneuvers that can deal 5 if conditions are being met, and the condition is you control a spacecraft. That will kill every single common, and it will kill over 90% of uncommons and rares. And Orbital Plunge, which is a 6-mana red burn spell. That will kill, obviously, all commons, as already the 4 damage or 5 damage one would kill them. And 96, 97% of the mythics and rares, which means 3 creatures can survive it in the whole set, basically. So these are our damage-based removals. Also important because some of the sweepers are based on that damage. So if you have a sweeper that can deal 4 damage to everything, that will kill like 88% of the common creatures, for example. Then we have some conditional removal, the removal that does not look at the toughness, but looks at other properties of the creature. And there's a couple of interesting ones. Seam Rip, that's, I think, a card that is mainly printed for Constructed as a sort of portable wormhole, I guess. It exiles a permanent with mana value 2 or less until it leaves the battlefield. Portable Hole, which was its equivalent, was an artifact. This one is an enchantment, and that's the main difference. Gets around 34-35% of the creatures at all rarities. Then we have Depressurize, a card that looks incredibly strong, to be fair. Like when I looked at the numbers that it produces, it does deal with 80% of common creatures and around 3/4 of uncommons and rares. And it's a very weird removal spell because it gives a creature -3/-0 until end of turn. And if that creature power becomes 0 after that effect, you destroy it. So it doesn't matter. It can be 3/8, but it will still die to Depressurize. And 81% for 2 mana, that's a really impressive number to be killing. So you can compare it. Comparable spell in terms of how many creatures it kills will be Bombard, which deals 4 damage. That's the sort of like level that we're looking at. So I am going to be pretty high on that card early in the format because it looks like it kills more than you would think. Then we also have Cut Propulsion. That's a 3-mana red spell where a creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. And if that creature has flying, it deals double that much damage to itself instead. And accounting for all of that, it does kill 70% of creatures at common and around 2/3 at uncommon and rare, which is also pretty good. It's also pretty good, especially that this one does kill a lot of those large creatures that red normally has problems with dealing with. And it works as a sort of like, dare I say, almost an unconditional removal for some of those like large creatures that normally red will have an issue dealing with. And the last thing that I put on that list is Shattered Wings, which is a sorcery speed version of Broken Wings with Surveil tagged onto it, therefore boosting the rich graveyard synergies in the set. And that one kills around 47% of common creatures and around 30% of uncommons and rares. It also will kill some of the enchantments and artifacts that are not creatures, so it has some other utility. Although, given that there is not much loot and card selection in general in this format, I'm probably going to stay away from that in best of one, unless I'm proven otherwise. So I will approach it at least as I'm not playing it in my best of one decks, and my mind can be swayed, and I can adapt with information being given. If killing spacecrafts is so important that I have to be able to do it, I'm definitely going to play it. But for the starters, I'm going to leave it in the sidelines. This set, one of hot takes that nowhere in any other podcast have been taken. This set has a lot of sweepers compared to the previous sets, and they vary from wraths. So Beyond the Quiet is going to be a wrath. Singularity Rupture is going to be basically a wrath. Two things that deal damage, like Terminal Velocity and Lethal Breaking, they deal a certain amount of damage to all the creatures. Two things that can kill something with Toughness X, like 0-point Ballad. Two, basically a reprint of temporary lockdown in Pinnacle Starcage. That just basically, yep. Finally, we got rid of the temporary lockdown from Standard. Let's put Pinnacle Starcage, which is basically identical to temporary lockdown. Exiles or artifacts and creatures with mana value 2 or less until this leaves the battlefield. And there are some weird ones like Mutinous Massacre, which destroys either odd or even creatures, and then you gain control of all the remaining creatures, and you get one attack with them because they untap and they gain haste. Very weird card that I'm pretty sure is going to end a lot of games. And yeah, there's plenty of things. There's Lethal Breaking, which is sort of deal 2 to everything at instant speed. I think that nowadays deal 2 to everything is an instant speed effect, it seems. But this one makes a lander. However, to do damage, you need to sacrifice an artifact, which the lander can provide, but maybe you can sacrifice something else if you want to keep the lander and if you have a choice. And some atrocious cards like Extinguisher Battleship. It's a spacecraft for 8 mana, and when it enters, it deals 4 damage to everything, and then you can crew it, and it becomes a 10/10 flying and trample massive thing. Or Terminal Velocity, where you may put an artifact or creature from your hand onto the battlefield. It gains haste, and when this permanent leaves the battlefield, it deals damage equal to its mana value, and you have to sacrifice it at the end of your turn. So basically, you can 6 mana, you can cast Terminal Velocity, put a 6/6 onto the battlefield, or like 6 mana creature onto the battlefield, and then when it dies at the end of turn, it will do pinks everything for 6. Very strange cards and very weird sweepers, but sweepers nonetheless. Any of you have any thoughts about the density and strangeness of the sweepers?
I think it's going to be really important to know what they are and know what colors they're in, so you can play around different ones. Because it's just going to be important to be like my opponent's in white, they're playing weird. They could probably have Beyond the Quiet. Or like they're in black-red. I need to maybe play around Mutinous Massacre if the game's if I'm already super ahead, so that I don't just like die.
So many sweepers also just makes like playing a very slow deck that doesn't play as much to the board early much more viable, something that you can like just pull off more often because you'll like find it won't be that hard to find a sweeper.
Yeah, and I'm quite, I don't know, I'm quite positive that slow decks are going to be a thing, and in weird color combinations as well. So we're going to talk about it maybe a bit later, but definitely there's plenty of sweeping that can go on. Okay, and here there are just some raw numbers just to give you the impression. I told you that like X1s are basically on par. 2 damage kills on par. 3 damage kills on par, and there's maybe slightly lower than normally amount of creatures that are killed by 4 damage spell at common at least. And that I think has to do with the cycle of like larger creatures at common that are there and ruining it. Normally there's very few creatures with power more than 4 at common in a set, and this is one of those sets that does have a few of them. Normally those were reserved to sets that have land cyclers, because as you can see, Duskmourn was there, LCI was there, but this time we see it in a set without the land cyclers because God forbid you have fixing in this set. Just another look at the same numbers, but this time broken down by actual toughness. So 19% of the creatures with 1 toughness, 30% of the creatures with 2 toughness, which is middle high for commons in a given set. 21% of the creatures will have 3 toughness, 17 4 toughness, and 13% more than 4 toughness, which again, as I said, is on the higher end of the common toughness sizing.
Yeah, one thing I noticed when I was looking through the set the other day is that there's a lot of creatures with greater toughness than power, like more than usual. And that makes the set just like a little more board stall-y and slower than usual. Like there's a bunch of like random 2/3s or
2/3 was one of the stat lines that I've seen, was quite a lot of it, like more than I thought, because I had this coaching session yesterday when I was going through the set, and I was like, well, 2/3 is not such a terrible body if it has an ability, and I said it so many times that there must have been many 2/3s. And trust me, I'm not a big fan of a 2/3 for 3 mana kind of stat line, but there was plenty of that in this set.
Higher toughness than power also is relevant for depressurize. The black removal spell.
But there is also the Butlord in green. So that's also good for that. Suika, I did not count. I normally I just exclude all the creatures that have 0 toughness printed on the card, because they are usually modular and grow with the game, so I can't really put them in the statistics for the removal, so I skip them altogether.
Mirko, did you include anything about Spacecraft in the sizing or no?
No, I did not include the Spacecraft in the sizing. I do know the sizing of the Spacecraft. They big. Apart from one that is a 2/2. Talking about Spacecraft, and I don't know who wants to be talking about it. Tresio, I think that you did the slide, so maybe you could introduce this, and then everyone can contribute their thoughts. Because I think, and I'm going to rip off Sam's podcast, but I totally agree with it. I had exactly the same thoughts. For me, it is the most difficult keyword ability to evaluate in the last years. I think I had, at least battles, I had a better idea on how to evaluate battles. I'm having much more difficulty evaluating those cards, because
I mean, the spaceship are basically battles, you know?
Yeah, they are, but their sizing is weird. And the amount of effort you have to go to, like no battles had like 9 life. You killed them.
Yeah, I feel like we'll get to it later. We should do this slide.
Yeah, but okay, let's give Tresio description of the battles, and then we can have a short discussion about it.
Yeah, first of all, credit for this and the next few slides actually go to D-Dave, who put them together but wasn't able to join us live today. So I'll be reading some of his content. There are 27 of these cards. 22 are spacecraft, 5 are planets. You'll see an example of the planet on the far right side. The planets are all mythic rares, I believe, and they've got special abilities and so on. But Wizards is setting up something for later with the planets because they've made a big deal about the fact that planets and spacecraft are a thing together. So, stay tuned for some later sets on that. But you can see the rarity. I mean, there's only 2 common spacecraft. You're going to have a lot of spacecraft concentrated at like uncommon and rare. You can definitely see that they're a power sink for board stalls. In other words, places to pour the power of your creatures. I think when I've been looking at them, I would describe them as somewhere in the middle of battles and vehicles, because they have a similarity to vehicles in that you don't need to interact with your opponent to pour power into them. You can just tap your creatures, and you're effectively using the power of those creatures to add the station counters to the spacecraft. And notably, you notice each of the spacecraft say put charge counters equal the power in the spacecraft. So unlike vehicles, it's not something you have to do in a turn. And also unlike vehicles, once you add the necessary number of station counters, the spacecraft is just a creature. So that's why we're saying here, each creature has kind of a pseudo ETB to station, because similar to vehicles, you can you're tapping the creature using the spacecraft, which means summoning sickness doesn't apply to the adding of counters. And there's synergy with the warp mechanic, which we're going to see shortly. Creatures that enter the battlefield for a short period of time can be used they'll usually have a small enter the battlefield effect, but then you can tap them to add some charge counters before they have to leave the battlefield. White-red is labeled as the station archetype. We'll talk about that a little bit when we get to the white-red archetype later. There are plenty of spacecraft all across the colors. So some open questions here are, how might the rules of engagement or speed of the format be dictated or not by this mechanic? We've seen before, like think back to Dragonstorm, where the design team made a concerted effort to make it so that big dragons could be played in the game, and that was going to be a feature. So the fact that you have history with Wizards designing that way suggests if they made a bunch of spacecraft, there's going to be design built in the format to allow big spacecraft to be played and to be stationed. Obviously, you'll have to see that play out, but you can bet that some design has gone toward that occurring. And then what about bouncing or top or bottom cards, or even things like Oblivion Ring effects, right? If somebody has poured a bunch of power into stationing a spacecraft and then all of a sudden it gets Oblivion Ringed away, well, then those counters have also gone away. And now you have to potentially start that back over again. And Shatter and Disenchant, Circle, you brought up that our typical green, destroy artifact enchantment flyer card. The fact that you have these things floating around and they're massive and huge artifacts gives at least a tally mark in the column of why somebody might consider main decking a card like that in this format.
Yeah, I mean, I have many questions. Like, let's start with this thing before we even go through the archetypes. But yes, white-red is labeled the station archetype, but there's no white or red common station. And that's strange to me, because I would expect if it's a dedicated archetype, they will have access to additional versions of it at common, and it just didn't happen. And I don't fully understand that. And yeah, I have many questions. Like, some of them look straight down bad to me, honestly, when I look at them. And
well, one of the things that Sam brought up on his most recent podcast was the question is there going to be is there going to be any aggro strategies in this format that will be able to get under this or beat you before these things can start happening? And I think you will see when we get to the archetypes that the design has definitely made that more challenging. Even if you just look at the color of white and you see what it cannot do, we'll be looking at those things coming up. But it's that's the big question, right? Can you play these things and can you activate them? Well, are you going to lose on turn 5 or 6 before you get to do that? Is the format set up to be able to do that to you? We'll be talking about that as we go.
Yeah, I think like in terms of the spacecraft thing, a lot of them look like in a traditional limited set, it would be like pretty unwieldy to try to fully station it, right? You just never would have time. But like we've seen sets before where it doesn't super matter, like how timely you get your whole like everything on a card, as long as it's like two pieces of cardboard. Sometimes a card can just be good, right? Like I'm thinking of like the 6 mana white vehicle that like reanimates something that like really is 2 full pieces of cardboard, right? You're getting back your best thing and you also have a big flyer. The problem is that it's really, really slow, right? Because like it takes 6 mana to reanimate something is not a good rate, and also tapping that many creatures to get a large flyer is not that good of a rate. But like maybe the set is just such that like what matter, like the fact that it's 2 pieces of like very relevant cardboard matters a lot more than the fact that it takes forever to get online. Like maybe you just have that time, and to some extent spacecraft also like snowball a little bit, because like theoretically if you get a spacecraft, like if you play a spacecraft that is like a little more cardboard than like, if it's like a 2-for-1, like it's making 2 bodies or something, right? And then you like animate that, suddenly you have like a little more power to work with, which will help animate your next one a little faster, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah, I did think about those kind of snowbally effects. I especially think of the red-white signpost, which when you have 2 tapped creatures at the end of your turn, you make an additional body. And yeah, maybe it's worth taking a hit, tapping out, making that extra body to later make an additional body from the spacecraft, get an additional thing, attack with the spacecraft, blah, 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 sort of spiral out of control. But yeah, maybe my brain is just stopping itself from thinking about it, because in the previous sets that we've had, you can't just tap out all your creatures for a turn and hope that you can survive that game, because most of the time you don't, and maybe here it's just going to be possible.
Yeah.
Anyway,
if you're wondering why you see cards in this set like a cheap 4/1 defender in black, this mechanic is one of the reasons for that.
I would guess so. I mean, it also is very good at stationing as a 4/1. So yeah. Okay, another mechanic, and I think that it links very much to the stations, is warp. Who wants to take warp?
I'll take warp. So warp is a mechanic with 32 cards across all colors and rarities. Pretty
more
big
than spaceships, then.
Yeah, more than spaceships. Pretty big presence at common and uncommon. Basically, it's like evoke or adventure. So you pay the warp cost, you put the creature into play. At the end of turn, it goes into exile, and you can cast the full creature later. So obviously, this synergizes really well with Spacecraft, because you can play the warped creature and use that to station. Most of them have an enters ability, such as Germinating Worm above, which is the 5 mana 5/5. When it enters, you gain 2. If the opponent is able to interact with the warp thing, you don't get to exile it later, kind of like countering an adventure spell. And this last point, passing the turn with mana up after not casting a spell with warp from exile gives the opponent information. So if you have 6 mana and you don't play your Germinating Worm from exile, your opponent knows something's up. So this mechanic's pretty sweet. It's on a pretty wide range of abilities. It's really interesting because it doesn't really read like an aggressive mechanic. And it's very value centered mechanic. Though there are a couple ways to kind of take advantage of the warp creature being temporary, like a couple ways to give creatures haste, so you can attack, and obviously it works with spacecraft too.
Yeah, and to one small point, because people might get the wrong impression. Not only creatures have warp. There are some cards that are not creatures that have warp. I don't know if it's just the one enchantment, but that actually does make creatures.
Yeah.
But there's something in. So what are the thoughts of warp? It does look like a very good take it or leave it kind of mechanic, and I think that play patterns are going to be very interesting because I draw my germinating worm later. I think that important thing that to mention is that you can't just warp something on a turn and then play it. You need to wait one turn. It's sort of like plot in that aspect because it will only get exiled at the end of turn, so you cannot sort of recast it on the same one. So you will have interesting choices whether I want to get full value but cast the creature one turn later, or do I want to get just the creature part.
Yeah, I think warp honestly to me reads a lot like adventure, where like a lot of so it's adventure where you can't go like cast the adventure then immediately cast the creature again, right? Which is slightly different. But a lot of the warp effects are like generally lower rate than we've seen on adventures, right? Like this worm being like just gain 2 life, or like the beckoner being like, you know, +2/+0, like sorcery speed, abnormal endurance, or whatever you want to call it. And so like these effects aren't that good, but sometimes you will just like have the mana lying around and you'll just and nothing to do with it, and it's like great to just like fit in your creature there, right? Like when you have, if you just randomly have 2 mana available, why not use the gain 2 life? But when the effects actually start becoming like actually strong are with spacecraft, I think, because like if you're getting that small bit of value, like adventure like value, but also stapled onto that is like put 5 charge counters on your spacecraft, that starts looking more appealing. And of course there's other ways to like do that, to like use it too, like things like sack for value benefits, or like void stuff, things like that, right?
There's a double spell archetype in white blue, so you're warping for cheap, and also there's an artifact synergy pair in blue red. So like something like this Pinnacle Emissary card up here, if you can warp an artifact card in addition to this, you can it's a way to like get cheap artifact triggers if your stuff cares about artifacts entering.
And I think that the Bygone Colossus is on this slide not by accident. This card has written, oh, that one is probably for some weird combos, because it's a 9-mana 9/9 with but it has warp for 3. So for 3 mana I can put a 9/9 onto the battlefield. And what do you do with it? Well, that's up to you. But there are a couple of things that you can, including giving it haste, trample, and +3/+2, or just stationing something very, very big, very, very quickly for very, very little mana.
Yeah, I don't know how good that card is, but it kind of reads animate target spacecraft.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna. I mean, the Colossus is in our black-red archetype. You're gonna see some of that combo stuff happening there. But a couple of additional comments is
there is Flicker in the format.
Yes.
Which is also a warp creature for some weird reason.
There's some card advantage to be had here also. I mean, the fact that, it's adventure and it's recastable. You know, like Beckoner, for example, is giving you, even though that effect is not happening at instant speed, that you're potentially getting it turn after turn after turn if you want it. And even with some of the rares that have some of the really good effects, like the 2 you see on the far right here with Emissary and Sunborn, most of the time with those cards, especially if they're more expensive, you normally have to play them, hope they stick, and then you're on a later turn, you're trying to get the advantage out of them. But now you can play them for cheap, and if your opponent doesn't have removal right away, you can get benefit out of them right away and get some of that additional incidental value plus the crewing of the spacecraft. And so what that says to me also is that instant speed removal in this format is going to have a very particular goal that's unique to this format, which is when they warp in their thing, can I kill their thing before they ever get real value out of their thing, right? And can I just remove that card advantage from them? And basically, this format's version of blow out the adventure, right?
Yeah, I think a really good example of the like whole you're getting extra card advantage, like sometimes more so than adventure, is like the dog, the tuna blue dog that Sig Appraiser with warp, basically, right? Where like you can use it as a Sig Appraiser, which is great, obviously. But if you have a lot of mana, like literally you can pay 6 mana to draw 2 cards and like get a 2/1, which is nice. Obviously, you can't do it across one turn, which makes it slightly worse. But like if you have anything that then like recurs it in any way, that just makes it even better, right? Like now you're recurring something that draws 2 cards, not just something that draws 1 card, right? And that can be nice and flexible.
Yeah, I was thinking, what do I do on turn 3? Do I warp it for the full value, or do I just cast it and have a Sig Appraiser? And I came to the impression that if this set is anything like previous ones, I'm just going to cast the Sig Appraiser and leave the warping for the later turns when I draw it with full mana and I want some action. But that's a very interesting card to mention. I'm glad that you picked that one, because I was planning to ask about it, but now I don't have to. Now we have Void, another mechanic. I can go through that. It's focusing in black and red, and it reads, if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn, or a spell was warped this turn, instead something else happens. So it has a normal effect, and then with Void it gets an additional effect. And those can happen like every turn or at the resolution of the spell. There's a variety of things. So example, Plasma Bolt deals 2 damage to any target. Void, Plasma Bolt deals 3 damage instead if non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn or a spell was warped this turn. So you can attack, trade some creatures off, or one of your creature dies, and then you can cast Plasma Bolt for 3. Or you can warp something, and then your Plasma Bolt gets an additional bonus. So it's a sort of like not even a kicker. It's just like an extra ability tagged on if some conditions are being met. And importantly, I think that it does not only trigger on your things leaving the battlefield, any player's thing leaving the battlefield. So it synergizes well with Warp, because Warp is one of the triggers activity, and Lender mechanic that we're going to be talking in a second, because that's a token that you sacrifice whenever you want to. And then spells on which Void trigger go from all right to pushed versions. So like Plasma Bolt, Sorcery Speed, Shock, not that great. Plasma Bolt, Sorcery Speed, Lightning Bolt, much, much better. And yeah, any thoughts on Void? Just the value mechanic.
It seems really well supported to me. There's a lot of like random artifacts that can sacrifice themselves, and there are also a lot of things that have free sacrifice triggers when they attack or otherwise. So it seems like if you do a little bit of work in deck building, it will be very strong and pretty easy to enable.
And there is definitely power in those cards, I think. Like Interceptor Mechan looks to me like a very pushed signpost uncommon.
It's also a very aggressive mechanic because it rewards you for attacking, because if you attack, then your opponent has to choose between letting you get through for damage or trading off and letting you turn on Void. Also, you're incentivized to remove your opponent's cards like proactively in order to trigger Void. There's a bunch of reasons why it's like good for aggression, and like the cards here are all like a fairly like aggressive creatures as well.
So like a classic small game mechanic, basically.
Yeah, small game, but with a focus on aggression.
Yeah, and there's a comment in the chat about it not working that well with Warp because of Sorcery Speed. We want to emphasize there are no instant speed Void cards. Like, they're Sorcery Speed stuff. And so therefore, you also need to be aware of, like, when is the mana going to be spent in the turn? That players that are playing Void-based decks are going to be playing spending mana in the second main phase quite a bit, because they're going to want to, combat to generate void situations in order to increase the value of those cards.
Also, Void notably explicitly calls out warp. If you warp something that turns on Void, it's not just something left. So if something was warped, that also works.
Yeah. Okay, Lander. Maybe Jason. That's your cup of tea, I think. Anything that has to do with lands is naturally seeded to you.
Oh, yeah, Jason has to do this one since he's seeded Lander. It's seeded throughout the entire presentation.
Not the entire presentation. I only landed on one slide. But I don't know. Landers are just like pretty good value tokens. They're comparable to clues, I would say, but serve a different purpose. Like clues are a like good in the late game kind of thing where you want to like draw towards more action. Landers draw you a card because a land is worth a card, but are better earlier as long as you can afford like to give up a bit of tempo, because as you go later into the game, it's less likely that you'll need more lands, and like the ramp that you'll get will be less impactful. But like there's like the green common that makes a lander and gives you 2 life for 1 mana, and like playing that on 1 and then cracking the lander on 2 is going to be like quite valuable, whereas like playing, if you draw it later, it'll be less valuable. But like drawing it on turn, like being able to do that turn 1 turn 2 play is probably going to be like worth more, a more valuable card than like something that like just like made a clue or drew a card would be. So like it's an interesting kind of token where its value changes across the course of the game. Obviously, there's a bunch of things that also play with it. Like there's various things that will care about artifact count, artifacts entering, sacrificing artifacts. The landers play well with those. Like you can turn your like late game landers into, instead of sacrificing them for lands, maybe you have a spell that like sacrifices an artifact for value, and then you just sacrifice your lander. It's a game object that you can play with. Another comparison could be Power Stones. I remember I think it may have been Sam who posted some post comparing like Brothers War green commons with that had to do with Power Stones with green commons from this set that had to do with landers, and they're like pretty 1-to-1.
They're like 4 green commons that are like 1-to-1 translations of bro cards, which I'm excited for.
Yeah. So Galactic Wayfarer is the 3/2 Argothian something.
Yeah.
There's Jaspera Sentinel.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, Jaspera Sentinel can tap your landers. It's really nice.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, so notably this gets a little bit into the like fixing slide, but there aren't any common there aren't any like dual lands at below rare. Like we don't have the normal like one of each dual that sometimes appear in packs. There's like very little fixing from like common level lands in the set. But there's a lot of fixing.
There's one.
There's a lot of fixing from landers, and also there's like a bunch of like random rare and bonus sheet lands. So like there will be plenty of fixing, and landers will like promote very much like a basic focused fixing strategy. And that'll be interesting. Like we've had a lot of sets in a row with a bunch of dual lands, and less so with a bunch of like basic fetchers. And basic fetching mana bases are always a delight to build, let's say.
Yeah, and especially you mentioned synergies. Then there's definitely artifact synergies. There's sacrifice synergies with landers. There's also synergy of, there are some cards that check the number of lands you control. Different names, different lands, and it's a bit weird to me that they put it in a set that basically you have 6 types of lands in your deck, probably, like at max.
I mean,
if you put 5 basics and maybe get one
the thing
land
is,
or something. The
cards that care about that, like if your number is 5, you're doing pretty good for those cards, right? Like you don't need to get to like 12 lands of different names or whatever, right?
No, but I would say make it easy to get to 5.
Well, I mean, I honestly think there will be decks where you are not splashing a color, but you will just run like you have no white cards in your deck, but you will still run basic planes because it will be like wastes with different name. I think I could totally see that happening, honestly, because of some of the cards that say like care about number of differently named land you control.
I'm already looking forward to playing with the land that regenerates insects, as it seems there's plenty of insects in the set, and it's on the bonus sheet.
Yeah.
I think another thing, this also bleeds into our fixing, but the fact that the most prolific fixing there is this lander token creation. But then in order to generate those lands, that's coming at a cost. You can just see that the fixing is not going to happen early, generally. I mean, you like a lot of your fixing is going to happen later. So you don't plan on, like we've seen in some sets, the ability to play for example, your 2-mana gold card that synergizes well with your deck, except it's got one off color pip on it. That's going to be harder to pull off in this set than in other sets because you don't have the dual lands that you can drop on one. The lander, you have to play the card that creates the lander token, then spend the 2 to make the lander token. Like there's just going to be some delay.
Yeah, it also the fact that you have to spend 2 on a lander token, powerful to get fully get an extra land out of it. But it does mean that you it pushes multicolored decks even more towards wanting cheap cards because if you make a lander token with this Galactic Wayfarer on turn 3, playing a 4-drop on turn 4 means you won't be able to use your lander token, right? You're not really with lander tokens. You're not really trying to curve out 3 into 4 into 5 into 6. You want somewhere in there to crack your lander token, and so a kind of structure that plays more cheap cards that generate card advantage is going to work a little better than one that's just play things up the curve,
And I think that this is where the role of very cheap interaction spells comes in. I mean, there's plenty of one mana removal spells, and I think that those are going to be exactly important for that reason, as you can, kill something that is annoying you and preserve your life total and crack the lander and then ramp into something big that will take over the game and will create this onboard card advantage where, yes, you are behind on the board, but your thing is so much bigger that they can't really attack through it, and then you can focus on building the rest of their stuff and maybe even stationing your spacecrafts. Okay, cool. We have a bonus sheet. It's a weird one as well. 45 lands. They happen once every 8 boosters, so you will have 3 of them per pod, and 15 of them are rare, and 30 of them are rare, and 15 of them are mythic. And I think that just calculating, they are going to be rarer than rares and mythics, I think, in terms of how often you will see them. So, what do you think about them? It's strange because so many of them are colorless. I mean, and tap for colorless mana, and in a set that already doesn't have fixing.
Well, theoretically, landers help with that because if you have a bunch of cards that make landers, you then use that colorless mana in order to get your real mana out, right? I do think there are a bunch that are wastes with flavor text, though. So I forget exactly which ones, but I do remember looking through them and seeing a bunch of things that looked like wastes with flavor text.
Yeah, I was actually pretty impressed with them after I looked at the whole sheet. There's definitely a big chunk that are just complete blanks.
Gemstone Caverns.
Yeah. Like Mutavault is good if your mana can support it. Blinkmoth Nexus is good.
Inkmoth?
Yeah, Inkmoth maybe. We'll see.
Inkmoth
regenerate insect land. That's a very important one.
Yeah. That one does look quite strong. So, Bonder's Enclave is another. All of the
Strip Mine Lock.
Yeah, Strip Mine.
You can Strip Mine Lock someone.
Yeah. There is. You can double strip mine lock because you can
Yep.
play 2 lands from your graveyard every turn. Whew.
Yeah.
Lovely times.
Well,
Lovely.
imagine how some of those things play with what we just talked about with landers. In other words, suppose that someone is very dependent upon that one basic land of that one color, and they're fine just playing that one single basic land because they have 7 lander token ways of going to get it, and then you strip mine that one basic land. It's going to be it's going to be a thing. But also, just think about picking one of these, just one that has some utility in a deck that cares about lands with different names, right? I mean, that's another cheap way to pull off an extra tally on those cards that care about that.
And there are creature lands that are actually actual fixing, which is nice.
Yeah, the creature lands are really good.
Yeah.
All of the creature lands are really good. Just like we're fine playing tap duels and limited anyways. Like it being a creature and oftentimes a stronger creature is great.
Okay, question now to you all. Would you play Ancient Tomb in your limited deck?
Yes.
No.
So I would in cube, but I don't think I would in the normal limited set. And just the power is not.
I think my prediction for Ancient Tomb, which admittedly is a card I haven't played that much, but I think specifically with the lander tokens, getting extra mana sources out, if you can pay 6 life to have a really fast start, and you end up, that fast start gives you lander tokens, which gives you mana acceleration, and then you don't need to use the Ancient Tomb as much. I think that has potential. So I'm seeing it mostly as a green card because that's where most of the landers are, and maybe a red card because that's the second most likely place you'll have a bunch of landers. But I think it's going to get overplayed in a lot of other decks where you're not using that acceleration to get more mana out of it.
Okay, so my take on Ancient Tomb is that I believe that Ancient Tomb is not a slow card, it's a fast card. You do not want to put in the slow deck. You don't want to, especially in this set, where we talked about how, landers pressure you to like play a bunch of cheap cards. Ancient Tomb is also really bad at casting cheap cards. What Ancient Tomb is good at casting is 3 drops on turn 2 and 4 drops on turn 3. That's what you want to use it for. And so you want to be an aggressive deck also that be able to use the tempo pushing you forward in order to like actually end the game before your opponent like makes up but if the game goes longer, the difference in mana becomes less impactful. So
Turn 2 Phyrexian Negator. That's what you want to do with Ancient Tomb. That's how I was taught, and that's how I'm gonna stick to.
Yeah, so like I'm not a fan of Ancient Tomb because like I think it's not actually a card for the green decks. Like I think the green decks have better ways to get access to a bunch of mana. You don't need Ancient Tomb, and Ancient Tomb is going to be a liability, both because it is colorless and because sometimes you will not be able to tap it very much, if at all.
And as chat points out, and the reason that I placed it as the first card in this slide is that you can also just pick Ancient Tomb at your paper draft and pay for your next 4 drafts.
That's definitely an option I'm going to opt for. Yep. All right, mana fixing and ramp. I don't know who wants to cover this one. I have no idea.
Well, I put the slide together, but Jason decorated the slide. So I'll say a couple of things and then I'll hand off to Jason. So please take note of Gene Pollinator. It's a pretty great card, and it's going to be one of the best ways to fix in the set. 1 mana of any color at common. Tap an untapped permanent you control. Think about cards that we've previously seen like Sentinel Stalwart. But this is tapping any permanent. As Jason mentioned earlier, things like, lander tokens before you crack them. And it's going to be a pretty good and one of the only early reliable ways to truly fix your mana. So imagine a curve where you play Gene Pollinator on 1 and then you play some 2-drop that creates a lander token that you can't crack right away, but you can tap it for mana right away. And we want you to take particular note of that card. Then the rest of the cards on this slide are basically the only ways to fix, And you notice at the bottom row, hey, we have dual lands, and they're all at rare. As Jason mentioned earlier, you're not getting dual lands of any kind at common or uncommon. You're getting one of these rares or one of the cards that are on the bonus sheet. And so it's going to be really, really hard to get dual lands. You've got your typical 3-mana Manolith, which is Blitz Volley, except, you have to pour 7 mana into it. And then notice that's talking about the differently named lands you control. So, how many cards do you want to be able to draw for 7 mana? That's right.
But by the way, it's not your typical Ozolith because it is uncommon, and that's a big difference from what we had normally. Not even the stupid 3-mana rock is available at common.
So really, your only common ways of fixing are the Gene Pollinator. Again, aside from lander tokens, just we're talking about cards that do it themselves, kind of. You have Gene Pollinator, and then you have Command Bridge, and look at the limitations on Command Bridge. I mean, you have amazingly a lot of hoops to jump through on this bridge, right? Enters tapped, tap an untapped permanent you control. Like, would you rather have Command Bridge or would you rather have Gene Pollinator? Hopefully, you've already answered that question by the time I finish the question.
Objection, loaded question.
And
Objection, you can tap your lander tokens to Command Bridge too.
Yes. However, your Command Bridge will still come in tapped. And so it's fixing in a set where fixing is tricky. And I will now hand off to Jason to talk about the decorations.
Yeah, so there, like Tresio said, there's not very much fixing in the set other than landers. And that makes landers very important. That means that all of your multicolor decks, any deck that you want to splash in, you will need to have landers. You splat in fact, what this dynamic of only having lander fixing means for this set is that it is going to be a little bit hard to have the normal 2 colors with a splash kind of deck, because if you're trying to splash, you're trying to have that 3rd color splashed, the way you'll do it is by we don't even have an Evolving Wilds, right? The way you'll do it is mostly by lander tokens, and the cards that make lander tokens are a little more dedicated, right? It's not just replacing your land slot. You'll have card slots in your deck that you need to have lander tokens for, or need to have cards that make lander tokens, right? And so so there's going to be plenty of decks where you just kind of don't really ever want to splash in, which is a little more different than normal. Obviously, there are still dual lands, right? Sometimes you might just randomly pick up 2 dual lands among all of the lands that rare on the bonus sheet, or sometimes Command Bridge, but it's just going to be a lot rarer. And I think a lot of the multicolor stuff we'll see will be not splashing a single color, but deeper things with if you're already playing 6 cards that make landers, why not just go wild and play 2 different splash colors, or be a fully 3 color deck or something? And that kind of thing can definitely be feasible, right? It's just if you imagine normal set that centers around mostly 2 color decks and but a good amount of 2 colors with splash. This set I think will be a lot more pure 2 color decks and really, really color intensive decks on the other side, much more bimodal than normal. Yeah. I do want to note something about Gene Pollinator. That card taps any permanent, not just non-land permanents. So you can use it as fix your mana, right? Tap a land in order to get a mana of any card. Crystal Grotto-esque, Or
you can also tap. There's a couple enchantment-based removal spells you can tap too, which is sweet.
Including auras that you put on your opponent's creature, which is really funny.
That is funny.
There is. I don't believe there's any Howling Minds in the set, though. Nothing that's if this is tapped, it's a benefit. I mean, there's cards that care about having 2 creatures tapped. Also, I think
there are cards that are caring about being tapped themselves, like the Seed Ship Agrarian, for example. When it becomes tapped, create a lander. How much value can Gene create?
Yeah, the 2-tap creatures thing is a big deal because you can activate it just with Gene Pollinator and that creature.
Yeah.
And there's some significant value you can get out of that.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to make landers. The one that I think is going to be one of the most important ones is not the 3-mana 3/3. Actually, like I mean, that card looks like it's good rate, but I think the 1-mana sorcery that like gains 2 life and makes a lander looks really good to me. Like it just like lets you rampant growth on turn 2, and if that's what the set is about, that might be like very strong.
Doesn't that kind of feel to you like almost the bushwhack of this set, like the occupying that 1-mana spot, and maybe even you have 3 of them, and you cut a land somewhere, and
No, the thing about landers is you don't generally want to cut lands to play more lander cards, because like first of all, when you crack the lander, you're already thinning your deck of a land, so it's like it makes it like.
Well, same with the lay of the land, and we did it routinely.
Well, that's true, but like you need to hit your land drops as you're cracking landers, otherwise like
it doesn't make sense to
ramp. Like pretty bad rate is the thing, right? Like if you play your Sammy's Curiosity or Sami, I don't know how their name is pronounced, but if you play that card and then you like miss your 3rd or 4th land drop, you have basically cast a 3-mana Lay of the Land, right? Because you didn't get value from the fact that you like made an extra land drop. And like that's not great, right? So like you don't generally want to be like you don't generally want to be like cutting lands to play these lander cards, because you need to spend the mana to crack the lander, so you need to have some mana to begin with, and the cards are just going to be overcosted if you're just using them as Lay of the Land, right? So like you don't really want to cut lands, and you don't need to cut lands because like they will help you like thin out your deck anyways if you're cracking a bunch of landers, which will make you like which is deck thinning is not that impactful of a thing, but if you're doing it like 2 or 3 times every game, it's just as impactful as like playing 16 instead of 17 in terms of thinning. Like I don't know.
The other thing about lander tokens that I think is really important is they're not in every color. Like they're very heavy in green. There's a bunch in red. There's a couple in black, but they're all conditional. Like there's this Scrounge for Eternity card here, and then there's a 2-mana 2/1 that dies into a lander token, so you don't get that up front. And the white and blue ones are extremely conditional. So it's kind of baffling to me because like limited mana bases are already bad. So if you're in the Esper color pairs, like you just get you're playing like a 9/8 mana base, 10/7 mana base, and you get no help in your mana base whatsoever from this mechanic.
Yeah, but I think that's a conscious choice. That they definitely designed this set to be, yes, you can play multicolor, but it's going to be 5-color green. That's what you want to do. You need to lean on the green, and that's how you're going to get there. And, like a bunch of those things that make a lander token in white actually make it for the opponent or something. So, yeah. For me, the strange thing is that it's not present in blue, given that the blue signpost uncommon makes a lander, which is like green-blue one. It's just a bit strange that only one side of the color pair is contributing towards the landers, which is a bit strange.
Yeah,
and you do have the Dauntless Scrapbot, which is a colorless way of getting your lander, which something.
Yeah, I honestly think that the Scrapbot might be like just a pretty good card because it like is one of the few colorless ways of mana fixing.
And randomly hoses the graveyard deck, which is very prominent synergy. So.
Yeah, I mean the body is also fine. Like you do make a good point, Sam, which is that like I do think that if you're not touching green or red, like if you're somewhere in the Esper colors, you're really going to need to pick up like any dual land you possibly see very highly, like because they're going to be like pretty rare.
Or deck building considerations to try to build a 10/7 mana base, like maybe you're only splashing 6 cards or something of a second color.
Yeah, like being more monocolor also works, but unclear how well you'll be able to do that in this set.
We'll see an archetype later that will do just that.
Right. I mean, there is a slide about the gold card, but I think we can skip it and move to the meat and bones of the podcast, because what can we tell about them? These cards are
This is some
multicolored.
bones.
They're multicolored and they have many colors in their casting costs, but most of the time there are 2 colors in those casting costs, because there are no 3-colored cards, and I think that there's like a 5-color card or something.
The one notable thing is simply that there is one at uncommon and one at rare for each of the 10 color pairs.
That is worth noting.
Only one at uncommon's very, yeah.
It's very not like last sets.
Yeah, I mean, this really shows that they also like are very aware of this thing where there's not very much fixing in the set, other than like the more dedicated like lander fixing, right? Like there, you can't really have 2 blue-white uncommons if your blue-white deck like doesn't have that much fixing.
And that may be actually. I was a bit surprised that both Halia and Servondam have double pips in their multicolor casting cost. That's a bit. So like, I like Servondam as a card. It seems very powerful, but double black in a deck that I think, if you want to play it according to prescription, should be very heavily white. It's a bit of a steep cost to pay for.
I understand why Halia is double pipped, because they don't want that to be splashed in any green deck. But
Yeah.
why did they double pip Servondam when you can't even splash that in your like Esper deck?
Yeah, I don't think you can even splash that in your Orzhov deck.
No.
most
You
of the time.
splash it in your green-black deck.
Sure. Your green black graveyard.
Well, and it's like, just think about a comparison from Final Fantasy. Think about Cloud of Darkness, and think about how often that card was splashable all over the place.
Yeah.
And compare that to the 2 cards that have similar casting costs here that we were just talking about. And that means that if you're in those colors, you can, that your chances of getting those cards to wheel is going to be even higher than normal, because the chances of that getting picked out to be able to splash elsewhere is going to be much, much more difficult.
That is a good point. Like, I think that signposts are going to, I'm going to be very keen on checking the pack 3 alpha of those cards and how different it is from previous sets, where I know that, you know, every signpost uncommon is going later in pack 3 every set I tested, but I'm expecting that to be even more true in this one. Okay. Right, let's go to the archetypes, and every archetype we're going to go through. The name is what WotC called it. I'm not taking any responsibility for those names. This is what it says on the leaflet inside of your pre-release kit. We're going to start with the first slide when we show the signpost, what it does, and we show enablers, payoffs, and key cards for what the archetype is prescribed to do. And then one of us will take over and give us their version of the deck. You were supposed to delete that, didn't you?
Wow, we're playing Final Fantasy.
Who told me that they deleted it? Anyway, so we're going to be talking. Okay.
So this was my archetype, but can I defer to Sam because of timing? And can we go to one of his archetypes?
Yeah.
Okay.
25 minutes.
Okay. Which ones are yours?
Can we start with blue green? It should be the next one.
Blue green. Okay.
Yes.
And then we have the picture of the deck that Sam built for us, and then we're going to look at some of the key cards on the side of it to talk about as a talking point.
All right. So blue green is.
Wait. I can do the introduction, and then you move to your version of it, because I'm just going to give what it says on the tin. And on the tin it says ramp. Indeed, the signpost is a 2-mana 2/2 that produces a lander, and then for a lot of mana it can make a 2/2 and draw you 2 cards. Some of the enablers, the Wayfarer makes a lander. It's a 3/3 solid body. Larvar Scoutlander is a spacecraft that can sacrifice a permanent to double ramp you. Importantly, it doesn't have to be a land, so you can sacrifice a lander, put 2 lands on the battlefield. Gene Pollinator is a card that ramps you and fixes your mana and stuff like that. And, you know, the payoffs for ramp will be expensive card, like Mouth of the Storm, 7 mana 6/6 flyer with ward that, fogs you for 1 turn, so you get like immunity from being attacked, basically. Or Glacier Godmaw, which is a massive creature that whenever your land comes into play under your control, creatures you control get +1/+1 vigilance and haste until end of turn. And things like your social engineering, which is a sort of improved version of the Chocobo Racetrack from the previous set. It's a 5 mana enchantment with landfall. You make a 2/2, but it also has a warp cost. And there's going to be some enablers. Like I single out this Terra Botanist, 2-mana 2/3, which is a very good defensive body. Landfall, gain a life. So you put a defensive body, stop yourself from being attacked, and over the game you gain some life, which hopefully makes you survive till you start dropping those haymakers after getting to 8 mana or something. Do you agree with that vision in your archetype?
Yes, I do. I think the specifics when you actually build the deck, at least the way that I'm going and looking at it, is I'm thinking of this as a gene pollinator deck. And what that means is I want to be very heavy base green. So you can see I actually included the mana base here. I believe this is 10 green sources. So you can really want to guarantee that you can cast your Gene Pollinator on turn 1, or your Sammy's Curiosity, which I think is fine, like another fine card to play. You can curve it with Gene Pollinator, tap the Lander token. The actual card names are kind of hard to read here, but the important part is that you have a lot of cheap things to tap to Gene Pollinator. So double Gene Pollinator works. Cryogen Relic is a card that I think is going to come up a lot. It's a 2-mana artifact in blue. When it enters or leaves, draw a card, and you can sack it to stun something, but basically to trigger the draw. So this is a perfect thing to tap to Gene Pollinator. I think the Biomechan Engineer is going to be phenomenal here. You can see that this deck is not straight blue-green. I would imagine it will be very rare that the Gene Pollinator decks will be 2-color. I think you're going to have a secondary color and try to splash a third color off a single basic. At least a third color. You can go crazier. The texture of these decks is you want a lot of cheap things, and you want a bunch of ways to... Basically, the way that the decks play out, especially the Sentinel Stalwart decks in Brothers War, are you kind of dump your hand, and then you want things that can allow you to keep spending your mana. So the early stuff is all set up. So Cryogen Relic, Biomechan Engineer. You have a couple 3-drops, like Galactic Wayfarer is in the 3-drop slot, which is the 3/3. It makes a lander. And then you want good top end and card draw. So I believe on the next slide, there is also Cerebral Download, which is 5-mana instant Surveil X, where X is the number of artifacts, draw 3 cards. I think the draw 3 is going to be great here because you're kind of dumping your hand. You have a lot of mana. You want to draw cards. The activated ability on Biomechan Engineer to make a 2/2 draw 2 cards looks awesome. Pinnacle Killship is a card that it is a spacecraft. It looks like one of the better spacecrafts to me. It's 7-mana 7/7, enters, deal 10, but the station cost is only 7. So if you have like one large threat and then like maybe a 3/3 like your Galactic Wayfarer, you can turn this on immediately. And a 7/7 is extremely big. Like 7/7 flyer, a lot of game states is a 2-turn clock. So that's a card I think I'm going to be pretty high on in green decks. Often when you're splashing in these types of decks, green and blue, the weak link in green blue is interaction. So you can see here I'm splashing like Plasma Bolt in the 1-drop slot. Orbital Plunge, which is the 4-mana deal 6, make a lander if it was excess damage there. So I think there's a lot. You can also splash like the good black removal spells are all single pipped. So I think there's a lot of splash potential here. I would guess, I think blue-green is the deck I'm most excited to go into. Notably, you want to be really heavy green. I think basically every blue-green deck is going to be like this to support Gene Pollinator and Sammy's Curiosity.
I mean, you should have warned us. We could have reused the audio from the previous episode when blue-green was the deck you would be most likely to go into.
That's true.
Yeah, that is solid. And it does look like, I think that the design team has decided that Simic is now not supposed to be, 95% of the time, not supposed to be played as a 2-color archetype. And I've been told by Ben Whites, who sometimes is joining that stream, but not today, that if someone was playing Simic in the last couple of formats, they did it wrong because it's not supposed to be played two-colored. It was designed to be played multicolored. And I think that it's Gene Pollinator is the card that convinces me that it's going to be the case also in this one. And heavy green, because of the Gene Pollinator, is a must. So I would even expect something like 10 forest mana bases with a bunch of other basic lands splashed because they will come together.
10-1-1-1-1, my beloved.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
more like 10-2-2-2-2, honestly. But
yeah, a couple of the bridges. By the way, there's going to be 2.25 copies of the command bridge per pod, so pick them accordingly, I guess. Okay, and this is yours, I assume.
Yeah, this is mine.
So let's continue because it's still technically. I assume that this is what you think is a Simic. Yep.
No. This is what I replaced the green black slides with.
Okay. So why they are not after green black? Okay, but okay.
I deleted the green black slides. I can explain.
Okay. So let's go to the second Samp archetype so that he can, spend the last minutes of this in peace and not.
Yeah, I made a bunch of these, but I don't feel like I necessarily need to talk about the other ones, but I do really want to talk about blue-black.
Yeah. Which is, of course, artifact control, as we all know.
Yes, of course, artifact control. So,
the introduction, it is designed as an artifact control. The signpost is a 3-mana 2/3, enters, you draw 2 cards, and you discard 2 cards unless you discard an artifact. So card advantage if you have many artifacts and you can discard them. Also, it has Death Touch on your turn. 2/3 Death Touch attacker is, solid. It will be hard to deal with favorably, especially when you drew a card out of it. And then you have a bunch of artifact enablers. You got the Virus Beetle, a reprint from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. You got the Dubious Delicacy, a removal that is an artifact as well and is a food for some reason. That sometimes is not tasty. And the mentioned Cryogen Relic, the sort of like a play on the Ichor Wellspring that you can actually has a self-contained sacrifice mechanism. And you have some like payoffs. There is the Cerebral Download, which makes you surveil X, where X is the number of artifacts before you draw 3 cards. So the more artifacts you have, the bigger selection you get from that card. There is Mechan Assembler. That's a 5-mana 4/4. And when another artifact enters, you create 2/2 colorless robot. And there is a thing called Self-Craft Mechan. That's a 4-mana 3/4. But if you sacrifice an artifact when it enters, it becomes a 4/5 and you draw a card. So if you have something that is very easy to sacrifice, you get a massive creature for 4 mana, and also you draw a card, so you get this insurance from that creature being killed off. And now your deck. What? Well, actually, there's a bunch of cards that were on the slide, so I think you think that at least some part of this is correct. Maybe not a control, but definitely artifact.
Yes, I don't think control is a good word for it. I really like black in this format. I think it has pretty fantastic removal. It's got like 6. It has 3 common removal spells, 3 uncommon removal spells, and they all look pretty solid. I think black as a color in itself has a very good attrition, small game, like sack rectangles, accrue card advantage. It just looks very coherent within itself. If you play Duskmourn, it looks a lot like the black-red sack deck in Duskmourn. And I think that applies not just to black-red in this set, which I think is more of a seeded like sacrifice deck, but I think it works really well in blue-black as well, and to a lesser degree, white-black. So as you can see, there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 blue cards in my deck skeleton. That's very intentional, and I think that's kind of a concession to the fact that I want to ideally build a 10/7 mana base, and also a concession to the fact that I think black just looks very coherent with itself at common and uncommon. So a couple of there's a lot of things that can sacrifice in black. And I think one of the big things blue gives it over red is Cryogen Relic, which just looks incredible if you're able to sacrifice it for free. Both like giving you the resource to sacrifice and being able to get 2 cards just for 2 mana. Similarly, I'm really into Nutrient Block in these attrition black decks as a 1 mana way to cantrip like this. Like there's a Bone Splinters variant that can sack an artifact for 1 mana. I think if you can't get the Cryogen Relics, I think this deck still works with Nutrient Blocks.
Okay, walk me through that one, because that's an interesting card, and obviously, it's a 1 mana food that has indestructible, and you can sacrifice it for 3 life like you do with food. But also, when you sacrifice it, or when it is put into graveyard from the battlefield, you draw a card. So that's a sort of like slight replacement for the relic. It doesn't draw the card on enter the battlefield, but it does on leaving it.
Right. So I think on the next slide, there's a couple other cards I really like that can sacrifice it. Specifically, the Selfcraft Mechan, which is the 3 mana or 4 mana 3/4. When it enters, you may sack an artifact. When you do, put a 1/1 counter on target creature, draw a card. This looks really awesome to enable on curve. And I think the Nutrient Block is a good way to do that starting on turn 1. A similar card that I like less, but I still think is pretty fine, is Swarm Color, which you can see here.
You mean the Bushmeat Poacher?
Yeah, Bushmeat Poacher. Yeah, there you go. So I think just in black having.
Sorry, Sam. Just because it will be an audio version. We know all the cards because we are sickos. But Swarm Color is a 4 mana 2/4 with flying, and whenever it becomes tapped, you may sacrifice another creature or artifact if you do draw a card.
And the other thing that the sack outlets do is enable Void for free. So Selfcraft Mechan and Swarm Color each enable Void for free on curve. Whether that means you are powering up, there's a 3 mana 2/2 with Menace that grows if you voided at the end of turn. This card at the top of the curve, Void Forge Titan, which is a 5 mana 5/4. At the beginning of your end step, if Void was triggered, draw a card, lose a life. I just think black works with all this sacrifice rectangle stuff. It's got great interaction, 6 removal spells across common to uncommon. Artifacts are naturally going to be a part of that. So I'm looking at this more of like a black attrition-based sack deck first and a blue-black artifacts deck second. But I think just so many of the things that give you multiple rectangles are artifacts that it's not going to be a problem to enable your Signpost Uncommon Alpha Rael or this Monoist Circuit Feeder, which is a 6 mana 4/4 flyer. When it enters, target creature you control gets +X/+O. Target creature an opponent controls gets -0/-X, where that's the number of artifacts you control.
How do you expect to have any artifacts after you sacrifice them so efficiently?
That's true. I don't know. I think it'll be fine. I think you'll have some stuff lying around at the end when the dust settles.
Yeah, this looks a sweet build. So
I think you could basically build the same deck in black-red and black-white too. I'm really into the Selfcraft Mechan, the 4 mana guy in blue specifically, and Cryogen Relic. So I actually think this maybe looks like the best black deck to me, but black-red looks really strong too.
Just to ask, Graph Pact Monoist, which one is that?
Oh, that is the...
Because you have 2 copies.
Yes, that is a 3 mana 2/1 flyer that dies into
2/2.
a 2/2 robot. Yeah. That one's like... You're not really super into sacking your 3-drop for another 2/2 to sack, but just sometimes I think you're just going to want to sacrifice things to trigger Void or activate your sacrifice effects, and it looks good enough to me.
Okay, and 0 Spacecraft inside.
Yes, I think this deck does not want to play Spacecraft.
Did the previous one play any Spacecraft? Oh yeah, it did. It had the 7/7.
The Pinnacle Kill Ship looks good.
Yeah.
By the way, a comment about Nutrient Block. If people are, open pack 1, pick 1, and they take Tezzeret and they want to try to build around Tezzeret, Nutrient Block is a great card. for Tezzeret, because it's a 1-mana artifact, and also if you get Tezzeret to its ultimate, which isn't that hard to do, nutrient block all of a sudden becomes 3/4 indestructible creatures very, very quickly. So
Oh yeah. That I also saw that there's a combo with one of the spacecraft that can turn artifacts into a flyer, 2/2 flyer. Also.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I think like we just saw in the last set, the 2-mana cards that smooth your draws were really important in Resentful Revelation and Dreams of Laguna. So I think Nutrient Block could have legs just as a card in general too.
And Nutrient Blood does remind me of Fountain Port in a way, in terms of how you will cycle it eventually for some kind of minor value. Jason is smiling.
Wait, sorry.
Fountain Port Bell.
Oh, okay. Not the land.
No.
You too constructed pill, Jason.
I didn't play that
limited
set.
my ass.
I didn't play that limited set.
Because it was not on the Pro Tour, yeah.
No, because I didn't like it.
Got him. Okay. Those are. Do you have any other archetypes that you put in?
I built a couple of the other ones, but I feel like they're straightforward and I don't need to talk about them.
Okay, then if they're straightforward, even I can pull them after you're gone. So that's fine. That's what I'm here for: moderation and reminding that we need to read the card names. Oh dear. Black White is as we all know, it's a go. Well. As we all know, Black White is a go wide archetype. It was designed to be go wide because there's so much go wide going on that it is very wide. I'm being ironic here, and this brings us to the maybe topic that we can touch before Sam will have to leave us. I was not building the skeletons because I am the moderator, but I was building those opening slides. And by the way, thank you, Jason, for deleting the Golgari one that I spent 40 minutes on. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's appreciated. Why did I spend 40 minutes on the Golgari opening slide? Because I spent 30 minutes on trying to find enablers for the graveyard deck that is described by Wizards. And I found one. There was one card that mills 3 cards that I found it's a sufficiently good enabler for the graveyard thing. And then I started looking, and I had to reread the whole spoiler. And I was looking even at rare levels, and I couldn't find any good enablers. And in the end, I just put random cards with Surveil 2, because that's as good as it gets in terms of enabling the graveyard shenanigans in this format. And it's the same with other things. And here we have white, black, go wide. And Servondam the Lucent is arguably an amazing go wide payoff. It's a 5-mana 4/4 Death Touch lifelink. It gives all your team +1/+0 and Death Touch. If you have 7 1/1s lying around, they become 2/1s, they get Death Touch, they do require being blocked. But my question is, how do you get 7 1/1s in this set? And some of the enablers that I highlighted here, Night Luminary, that's a 4-mana 3/2. Whenever it enters, you create a 1/1, and it has warp for 2 mana, so we can just warp it, make a 1/1, then it goes exile, you can recast it, you make another 1/1. That's actually quite good as an enabler for a go wide strategy. But then I started looking, there's one more uncommon that makes 2 1/1 bodies, and that was about it. So I put Scout for Survivors, a 3-mana reanimation spell that reanimates up to 3 target creatures, but their total mana value has to be 3 or less. So I think in the optimistic scenario, you reanimate a 1-drop and a 2-drop, and you put +1/+1 counter on each of those cards. So it's a fine spell if you can get a 1-drop and a 2-drop in your graveyard. And if you're trying to go wide but also attacking a bit, that actually might happen. And I put Rayblade Trooper. That's a 3-mana 2/2, and when it enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on something. And then whenever a non-token creature you control with a counter on it dies, you create a 1/1 white human creature token. Also has warp. So these were the enablers I found. There's absolutely nothing in black that enables going wide. There is the card that Sam was using in his deck, the 2/1 flyer that dies into a 2/2, but that does not enable you going wide. It enables you to have creatures, because once one dies, another replaces it. But it's not exactly go wide. It's not the preening champion. It's definitely preening champion at home, and it's not even a good home. There are some payoffs. Don't get me wrong. There is the Dual Sun Adepts. It's a 3 mana 2/2 double striker, which is perfectly serviceable, and for 5 mana it gives +1/+1 to the team. There is the Lux Knight Breacher, which is a 4 mana 2/2, but when it enters with counters for each other creature and artifact you control. So if you go relatively wide, it can be a 4 mana 5/5 or something. And there's the Swarm Caller, which we mentioned, the 2/4 flyer that whenever it becomes tapped, you can sacrifice something. If you go wide, but you need to find answers, great to sacrifice part of your board in order to get some cards. But there's just not enough enabling for it. There is no such thing as even the Aerith rescue mission from Final Fantasy that made 3/1/1s. Forbid to have the 7 mana make 4/1/1s and put counters on your team, because that would have been way too good. So despite it saying white, black, go wide, I don't see any way that it can work as an archetype. I don't think that, I don't think that the deck will be bad. I don't think Orzhov is going to be bad in this format. I just don't think it's going to be strictly doing go wide. And it's very misleading for new players that are going to play the pre-release. They will open the leaflet, they will read what the deck is supposed to do, and they will try to build it. And it's not there. Anyway, with that...
If I could say one thing before I have to go, I do think... just to stick up for the set a little bit, I do think while the archetype names are misleading, only having one signpost uncommon does leave the archetypes to be pretty open-ended. So if there was no archetype descriptions and we just got Servandum, I think there would I think it's fine for there to not really be a go wide deck in black-white, because I think black-white looks pretty good as an attrition deck. And I think even red-white with Sammy as the signpost looks like it can do go wide stuff pretty well and take advantage of the Trumpet Blast or the 2/2 double striker that can pump the team, or the blue-white double spell deck. Doesn't have that much support, but you can play the double spell cards that are blue in your blue-red deck and still use red warp cards. So I think the archetype, there's a lot of fair criticism about the archetype descriptions, but I don't think that the archetype's descriptions being inaccurate is that bad a sign for the set. When we only have one cycle of signpost uncommons and the themes are going to be very loose.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not claiming that it's a bad sign for the set. I just think it's a bit irresponsible towards the newer players who then get bird for life from limited because they had a bad experience. I assume. So you need to run now.
Yeah, I have 2 minutes.
Okay, so let's give you a nice send off. So do some plugs. I think I already put in the chat about Rough Drafts. It's a great podcast, and do listen to it. But do you have anything else to plug?
Nope. You got all my socials. I'm gonna put my link tree in the Twitch chat. But yeah, thanks for having me. It was a blast as always. I'm very excited for the set as usual. So.
And enjoy whatever you're doing right now. And thanks for being here. It's always beneficial for us to have your insights. And yeah, to all of the listening, listen to the latest episode of Rough Drafts. It will give you a nice insight into Sam's brain in terms of what this set is all about. I found it very enlightening when I was walking the dog earlier today, and I listened to it.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Bye. Right. I assume that if I see green card and white black, it's Jason's, isn't it?
No, this is not my set.
No, this is
okay. Oh, Tresio, you are the anarchist now.
I do want to say something.
This was the first. Oh, go ahead, Jason.
Oh yeah, I do want to say something dovetailing on what Sam was saying, which is that I do think that I think what might be happening with the archetypes in the set is that the set is not as top-down focused as most sets are, and but the way that Limited is communicated about, including this whole archetype skeletons things, is very top down. What are the archetypes, what are decks gonna look like, because that's the one of the easiest things to communicate, and one of the best ways to get a broad picture, broad strokes, the best way to communicate that to a newer player or something, right? So I don't think that I suspect that the box insert on this set will be less accurate than usual, because it seems like it's just going to be a lot of like random building blocks that you need to figure out how to put together, rather than as prescribed archetypes for each color, which it'll be like maybe a little different, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be bad.
Agreed. Okay, Tresio, off you go.
So the reason I put this slide together was because when I was working on this skeleton, I was thinking a lot about white and its position in the format, and I very quickly got to things like banishing light. How much do I want to include this common in whatever white archetype you talk about? And this is kind of like a public service announcement about O-ring effects in this format, and this relates to what we talked about earlier with Shattered Wings. So what you see on the slide, including Banishing Light itself, are the only ways to remove enchantments in this set. And please note that 2 of them are rare, and one of them is a torpedo that may or may not be played. We see that card, sometimes come in. The costing 3 less is intriguing, but at any rate, there's not a lot of ways to destroy enchantments in this format. And how many of them are likely to be main decked? We've already talked about the fact that Shattered Wings, maybe because there's more artifacts that we care about in Spacecraft. But what that says to me is that, and Banishing Light is definitely not the only O-ring effect we have. We already seen a couple of others, including the remove all the mana value 2 or less. And we've got the cheap one too that is going to come up in an archetype here, where 1 mana remove something with mana value 2 or less. That's kind of a buy time type of a thing. So this is just a public service announcement that the O-ring effects, I think, are going to be a little bit stronger in this set than they maybe typically are, because there's not a lot of ways to get rid of them. And even the cards that can get rid of them are also being used to get rid of artifacts that people may care more about. So keep that in mind as you build and play.
But what about every opponent I'm going to be playing that will main deck Siege Ship Impact?
Well, first of all, the fact that it's on an uncommon matters, right? You're going to see it less than some other things. But again, we've had things like that before, uncommon enchantment removal. The point is, it's less frequent here than we've seen recently.
No, that's a very good point. There's no creature that randomly can sacrifice to kill an enchantment that we often get.
Right. So now we can go. So this is the archetype I put together, and Sirgivit's already talked about the 2 cards that you see at the right side. These are the multiple body makers. Yep, that's them. So I have them in the deck, and this is an attempt to can you go wide at all? And one of the things that you're going to have going for you in white-black is that by creating these extra bodies or these extra tokens, these extra cheap things, you're going to be creating sacrifice fodder. And so I don't have all of the black sacrifice cards in here or anything, but anything that sacrifices is going to enjoy having white as a support color, because it's going to have extra stuff and extra fodder to sacrifice. Now, the Honored Knight Captain, it's at uncommon, which is annoying. Just think about some of the reinforcements cards we've had that also have flash and lots of additional utility that this doesn't have. But there, in particular, there's a 3 mana white creature that can cause you to pick up one of your permanents. So there are curves where you'll be able to play Knight Captain and then play the 3 mana creature and pick up your Knight Captain and then double spell with it on turn 4, things like that. The sacrificing and searching for equipment is almost completely irrelevant here. It's nice, but not really in this limited set. But the Knight Luminary, go ahead.
There's 1 equipment where you would ever want to do that. It's the common 5 mana flyer.
Right, exactly. The Knight Luminary is interesting because the warp cost isn't great. 2 mana make a 1/1. Who cares? But the reason the Knight Luminary is really important is look at the curve of this deck. There's not a lot of stuff. You notice that I placed the Knight Luminaries in the 2-drop slot, not in the 4-drop slot, because you need to think of them as 2s, as something you can do on 2. Otherwise, you're really in trouble with this curve, and that shows you some of the problem that this archetype has if you're trying to go wide. I think that the plan here has to be to just have a massive, swinging turn in turn 5. If you look at your 5 slot, that's where we have the Servandum, the uncommon version. By the way, they were so inventive with the archetype that they gave both the uncommon and the rare the Servandum name. So, but that's a pretty swingy turn. If you look at Servandum, we've got it expanded the lower right. I mean, a 4/4 Death Touch lifelink, and when it comes in or attacks, so it's a repeatable anthem, which is something, and it's a repeatable anthem that's giving Death Touch, which means now all of a sudden your opponent has a lot of choices to make with even your small creatures. Like now you've got a bunch of 2/1s that have Death Touch, and so are you going to trade off for the useless 2/1? And I think one of the things to discuss here is how you would get into this archetype in the first place, because you're definitely not going into a draft saying, how can I get into white-black, go wide stuff? And I think the reason is because of particular rares that you would be totally happy to first pick, and then maybe the main direction you chose to go with them is not available. So, for example, I think if you go to the next slide now, we see the double striker there. These are the 2 rares I chose here. I mean, if you look at these rares, they're great, right? I mean, look at you have the cheap Spacecraft that costs almost nothing to enable, and it's a +1/+1 anthem for all your creatures. Who wouldn't want that? And then
you
later
probably don't even want to turn it into a creature so that it doesn't die.
Right, but I mean, you can later if you need a flying finisher or something, but that's not going to be that hard to do when all your creatures have 1 extra power, and you have a lot of them. And then the Zenith, even though it's a second spell kind of a thing, it works really well here because of cards like the Luminary, where you can cast the Luminary for 2 mana, and so you can play the Zenith on 3, and you can reasonably double spell on 4, using, like, for example, Luminary and one of the 6 1-drops that you have in the set, or in the skeleton. And now you're talking, because now you're repeatedly making 2/1/1s, or you're repeatedly putting counters on your whole team. So imagine picking like the Frigate or the Zenith first pick, and then maybe you have some other direction you decide to go, and it's not very open. A lot of the cards that you see in this skeleton, you're not going to be challenged for. You're going to be able to pick them up as the draft goes on, even up to and including the signpost uncommons, because like we talked about before, they're unlikely to be splashed anywhere. And so you may even end up with things like, a 3rd or a 4th or a 5th rare that align with this, including like the white-black rare that's quite good. And so that's how I imagine you getting into something like this. And if you go follow the link that we have on one of the last slides to go and look at the archetype more deeply, you'll see why I mentioned that this sets up for can I get on board and then have a really big swingy turn 5 that the opponent can't really recover from.
Yeah, by the way, I'm going to put the slides for this on my Patreon, but it's going to be open to anyone. So you can just go to my Patreon and just access the slides probably somewhere tomorrow. Okay, and that's it for this deck. Yeah, and I think that there are other ways of building it as well. I think that like there is a version that is more leaning on the virus beetle and black removal and just completely ignores the go wide aspect of it and just builds an attrition deck that plays a small game, maybe with the black draw 2 cards kind of spell that I think looks pretty juicy in this type of deck.
And by the way, one other card to call out that I didn't put in the side, but I think is pretty important if you're trying to win relatively quickly here, is the Faller's Faithful, the black 3-drop. That card has a ton of...
Oh, is that the 3/1 that can kill a creature and its controller draws 2 cards if it was not
if the creature didn't receive damage this turn? Yeah. So you can play it second main and kill something that they use to block one of your 1/1s, right? Or you can sack your own thing and use it as card draw.
Yeah, or just kill something that is super annoying and just have them have 2 cards. They're not going to be better than the thing that just killed.
Well, right, as a finisher, for example, right? You're on your final turn, and you just need to remove that one last thing, and then you drop it in.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very, very interesting card, like with implications. And I'm going to be super interesting how it's going to play out and actually what modes are the most beneficial for playing it. All right, so we had the blue-green ramp. Nice.
Okay, I can talk about this.
Okay, yeah, thank you for deleting my 45-minute slides, and then let's hear it. Why it was not deemed not correct or something.
Well, no, I just okay. No one was interested in building black green. It it seemed like the
That's true.
whole black
That's true.
graveyard stuff archetype, so to speak, was not really a thing that existed. And so my whole idea this time. So I usually come. I usually come into these with a very chaotic mindset where I will I'll just do something, and it's probably not gonna it's not gonna really fit with the whole archetype skeletons thing, because I far be it from me to follow the rules or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you might not know it, but we totally did not invite Jason. It just came.
Anyways, okay. Either way, one of the reasons why I tend to not really build my own classic archetype skeletons, or at least I haven't since the very early days of doing these, is that I've been finding a lot in recent sets that I don't care that much about the whole like I said, the top down viewing a set of and seeing oh, what is each of these archetypes, what is each of these color pairs doing. That's all well and good. That helps communicate things, especially to newer players that are important, and it's important to look at that side of the set. But I also value a lot, and I think I value a lot talking about the set from the other perspective as well, from the bottom up, and looking at individual cards and saying how do you play with these individual cards, and looking at various various bottom up ways to utilize specific cards. I think that's also a very valuable perspective to have, and it's one that is focused on less, right? There's a lot of focus on oh, what do each of these color pairs do, which color pair is the best, how do you build green black graveyard or whatever. In this set, apparently the answer is you don't, or something. I don't know. But so yeah, I think that this seemed like a great set to propagandize about, looking at the set from the other perspective. Look at a card of interest and ask, how do I maximize this card? So one of the cards of interest I decided to focus on here is Survey Mechan. This is a 4-mana 1/3 flying hexproof creature, artifact creature. Very weird stats, very weird. Why would you play a 4-mana 1/3 flying hexproof? Well, because it's not a creature. It is a Path to the World Tree, card draw spell, whatever you want to call it. It has the ability 10 sacrifice this, which is an amazing cost. You deal 3 to any target, you draw 3 cards, and you gain 3 life, and you pay 1 less for each different each different land name you control. So if you have 5,
which is basic.
Yeah, well, I mean, you hopefully will have other non-basics as well. But if you have all 5 basics out, 1 of each, then it will only cost 5 to activate. So then you're activating it for 9 mana total, 9 mana to deal 3 to something, draw 3 cards, gain 3 life. That's pretty good. And also, importantly, this is an instant speed ability, which means you can chump and then use it, which makes it even better, because then you're gaining I don't know, virtually 6 to 8 life instead of just 3. So yeah, this is a very powerful card. It looks very much like Path to the World Tree. The Dragon Brood relic from TDN. We've seen cards that are like this, right? Somewhat multicolor payoff. This is the first time we've seen something phrased like this, as opposed to having a Wooburg activation cost. But it's the same idea. And then so naturally, the way to try to break this is, well, okay, first of all, how do we enable it? How do we get our 5 colors? That's my second column here. With you obviously want it to be base green. You want to have a bunch of landers. You can find all 5 colors of basic. You can play non-basic lands as well if you find those. It'll be great. It shouldn't be that hard. And then the question is, how do you abuse it? Well, you recur it, because this is a permanent that you can, like, not only is a permanent, is a creature, which means that it's not that hard to, like, repeatedly bring it back from your graveyard. And, you know, it doesn't exile itself, so why not? There's, like, a bunch of cards in the set. You can go to the next slide, I think. It has a couple of them. Oh, no, that one was the, like, ramp stuff. But, yeah, there's a bunch of ways to recur creatures in this set. You know, there's like the black red and black green signposts both like can return creatures from your graveyard to the battlefield or to your hand respectively. There's also the this black warp creature, which I think is very interesting for this kind of archetype, because since it's a warp creature, it does it twice. It's the kind of, you know, feign depth or like abnormal endurance kind of card where you make a creature have, when this next dies, return it to the battlefield, right? So you can like warp this in, target your mechan, use your mechan, it'll come back, and then later you can play it from exile, target your mechan again, use your mechan again, it'll come back again. So like, you know, just this one card can represent recurring one survey mechan twice, which is pretty exciting. Then, of course, there's like a larger regrowth effects like Pull Through the Weft, which is a card I'm pretty excited about as just like a nice grindy card. And part of the reason why I'm particularly excited about this like Survey Mechan recursion kind of stuff is that Survey Mechan is a card that like kind of snowballs, right? Because it draws 3 cards and like, you know, stabilizes you somewhat. It like kind of snowballs into more resources, and the more resources you get, the easier it is to activate, because hopefully you're getting even more land types in play, and so it'll just be better the next time, right? I think you can just play a deck that's like leaning on this for card draw, like a lot of it just represents a lot of card draw, especially if you have ways to recur it, and you just play a bunch of cheap removal. Next slide, please. Finally, there are some cute doggos to help you, because you might deck yourself if you're trying to do all of this and trying to recur a draw 3 like 5 times per game, right? That can lead to some decking, especially if you're also pulling lands out of your deck with landers. But this doggo is here to help. 2-drops are very scarce in the set, as we saw from the black-white skeleton. Like you would expect white to have a bunch of 2-drops. You would be wrong. White doesn't have like there's no color in the set with a bunch of 2-drops. The set is just slow that way. So this is not only is this a 2-drop, which helps quite a bit with like, you know, stabilizing you. It also gains life, which helps stabilize you, and it also lets you you know, keep going for longer, keep looping your deck without needing to like play like 50 cards or whatever, because you're gonna draw 20 of them. I don't know if you I don't know how like, you know, wild you will be able to get exactly with this set. Like I don't know exactly how Sam Black-esque of a controlling deck you can build, but I certainly hope to try, and I certainly think that Survey Mechan will be part of that. Also, honorable mention to All Fate's Scroll, which I think is the worst version of Survey Mechan because it's harder to recur because it's not a creature, but it draws more cards. That's the one that like 7 tap sack it to draw equal to number of different lands you control. Like drawing 5 or drawing 7, who knows, maybe, on one card is pretty potent.
I'm disappointed that you didn't even include the plan B of Voltronizing Survey Mechan and using the hexproof ability to properly, as Garfield intended.
Well, the purpose of the hexproof is just so that your opponent can't like remove your draw 3. You know, you can play it on turn 4, and your opponent like can't remove it, so you can just draw 3 on turn 5. Like,
I mean, if there was Blanchwood armor in the set, I would be more likely to actually think about this plan. But I know that you would never, because why would you kill the opponent when you can get value?
I mean, you legitimately could, right? Like, there's like the X green card that says like with warp. That's like, leaves the battlefield. You like put its counters on something else. So you definitely could.
I mean, putting 1 copy of that in this deck just gives you a plan B. You would feel dirty utilizing that plan B, but hey, sometimes you got it.
Mhm. Oh, also, I will note I put the blue tutor here. I don't know if it's a good card. It's 4 mana to tutor up an artifact, or 4 mana to recur an artifact. It might be
both.
way too expensive. It probably is way too
I
expensive.
mean, or both. Yeah, I mean, I think that if you can trigger both, it's actually good value. You draw 2 spells for 4 mana. That's fine.
Yeah. Both is good, but the problem is that it's like really, it's pretty restrictive because you need it'll probably be good if you have a bunch of artifacts. But
I mean, you get like one of those spheres that Samp was preaching about. You got maybe one of those indestructible foods. Easy to get into the graveyard, and you get some value out of it.
I mean, your opponent will be forced to kill your gene pollinators in order to not be buried in mana. So you'll just on turn 4 cast one of these to get 2 gene pollinators.
I think Scour for Scrap is legit card. I mean, it's going to be a draw 2 a lot of the time if you have 8 artifacts in the deck. And judging by your list, that's going to be an easy to, and getting a bit of a toolbox, because the fact that you can tutor for anything. If half of it's Demonic Tutor is not a Diabolic Tutor is not the best card in the world, but it's a playable card. And if half of your deck is basically tutorable, fine. And if you get extra card because you get sacrificable artifacts in your deck, or you trade them off because your Chrome Companion blocked early, traded off with the 2-drop, and you want it now because you're almost decking, happy times. So I'm very much in favor of this Scour for Scrap in the right deck.
Yeah, the point basically of this whole exercise and building around Survey Mechan is just that there's a lot of ways to recur like a creature in this set. There's a lot of ways to grind like that. And Survey Mechan is probably the best thing to keep recurring because it sacrifices. Obviously, Busted Bomb Creature is pretty good to recur if they keep killing it. But Survey Mechan is the best thing to do at Uncommon, I think. If you just have the abstract goal of getting resources and then assembling a lot of resources and throwing them at your opponent.
I mean, I'm not going to be against also doing that to the 6 mana 4/4 that kills a creature and gives your creature +X/+0 until end of turn.
Well, right, but that's actually what I was going to bring up, is that if you're already touching black here, having that creature also in this deck is great, because it coming in, you have enough artifacts that X is going to be a decent number. And then if you already have your Mechan sitting there and you're waiting to sacrifice it later, getting in a couple of incidental attacks in the meantime, where you're coming in and let's just say you give the Mechan +4, and then you're giving -4 to whatever flying blocker they have, and all of a sudden the Mechan's getting in for 5 that turn that you play the 4 black, and then it also becomes something that is a secondary recursion target.
Well, but then you shorten the clock for value accruing.
Well, it's even sweeter when you deal the last 3 points of damage by sacrificing your Survey Mechan, so it's fine.
I mean, I would assume that you were planning to deal all the 21 damage.
No. You do it 5 times, right? You play the Mechan. Next turn, you attack with it, sack it, get it back. Then you get it back, play it, and then you attack with it, sack it. So you only need to do it 5 times, because each time it attacks for 1 and then bolts them for 3.
Oh yeah, it doesn't need tapping for the sacrifice. That's important.
No. Yeah, it's great.
Okay, artifact aggro, because let's go to something simpler. By the way, do not try this at home, at least not in the week 1.
Try it at home.
Leave
Try it
Jason
everywhere
to experiment, and then copy the homework.
I give you my blessing.
Don't do it at home. Who's going to do the red-blue aggro? So I'm going to introduce it. It is very similar, at least in what they described, to the Lost Cavern of Ixalan aggro deck. The signpost is a 3 mana 1/3 flyer. Whenever an artifact you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So it can grow itself, it can grow something else. It's a good evasive body, I guess, once you put a counter on it. But maybe you want to start putting counters somewhere else, because that's going to be a prime target for the removal from then on. But maybe, I don't know, if you're playing against a red deck, you want to put it out of range of most of the burn spells and continue through that. You have a bunch of artifacts in the set that are doubling up as spells. And, Cryogen Relic was already mentioned. I think that's going to be a very gluey card. That's the 2 mana. When it enters or leaves the battlefield, draw a card. And also you can sacrifice it to put a stun counter on something, which is good in a tempo-aggressive deck, because you can remove the blocker and open the path for good attacks. There's a bunch of artifacts that have flash or can be played as a sort of spells. I highlighted here the Ilvoi Light Jammer. That's a 2-mana equipment with flash. When it enters, you can attach it to something, and that creature will gain hexproof until end of turn. So you can protect your, for example, Menon Uthros Exile, the signpost, at least from one of the removals, and at the same time get a counter on something. So I think it's a pretty good raid, by the way, because it gives +1/+2 when it's equipped, and that's quite a lot. Normally we get this effect like an aura that gives +1/+1, and +1/+2 is better than +1/+1. It turns out. And you have things that can generate multiple artifact bodies. So you have Kavarun Harrier, a 1-drop 2/1 artifact creature. But whenever it attacks, you can pay 2 mana and you create a 2/2 robot artifact that will be sacrificed at the end of combat. But you create an artifact and get all the triggers for artifact being made. And then you have some of the payoffs. Sam mentioned in his skeleton the Spellcraft Mechan, the 4-mana 3/4 that you can sacrifice an artifact when it enters to make it a 4/5 draw a card creature. Mechan Assembler, that's a 5-mana 4/4. Whenever another artifact enters, you create a 2/2 robot. This one stays permanently. And there's Oreplate Pangolin, that's a 2-mana 2/2. Probably one of the better 2-drops that's common in the set, I think. 2-mana 2/2, and whenever another artifact you control enters, you may pay 1. And if you do, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So a 2/2 that can grow with the game sometimes if you play slightly off curve, which you can with those artifacts that are relatively cheap, some of them. And you have a couple of
One of the important enablers that's missing here is a card we talked about earlier, the Dauntless Scrapbot, the 3-mana 3/1, because it happens to be the only artifact that is available to these colors that makes 2 artifacts on entry.
Very good. Yeah,
it makes itself in a lander token, so it's triggering the uncommon twice by itself, which is pretty good.
Yeah, and I think that sort of cements its role as, you might underappreciate that card, but I think it actually has a lot going on there, and a lot of small things that it does quite well. And the 3/1 body is actually not a terrible thing. So don't ignore that card early in the format because it looks pretty solid. The 3/1 colorless uncommon. All right, and
I think this was Sam's, and
that was Sam's. Okay, so
this is going to be very similar to a lot of things that he talked about in Blue Black. With notice the Mechan and the Relic, and
nutrient block.
Even mentioned how that could be built potentially blue with something else, or even black red. Some of those kinds of things. So
I think that interesting 2 things that Sam put in here is the Zookeeper Mechan and Steel Swarm Operator. He's got 2 copies of both of those. And these are 2-mana mana dorks. Zookeeper Mechan is a 1/3 that taps for red and has some kind of 7-mana ability that you probably will never use. Gives +4/+0 sorcery speed. And Steel Swarm Operator is a 2-mana 1/1 flyer, and it can tap for a blue. But you can only spend it to cast artifacts, and it can tap to add blue, but you can only spend it to activate abilities of artifact sources. So namely, you can use it to sacrifice your Cryogen Relic, or you can tap it to sacrifice a lander, or you can tap it to sacrifice the nutrient block. And I guess you can't tap it for 2 mana for warp, because warp is a cost. Jason, you're the judge here.
What's the question?
Can I tap Steel Swarm Operator for blue to activate warp costs?
Warp is not an activation. It's casting.
Okay, it's a casting cost. Okay, yeah. So you can only tap it but you can still tap it for 1 if you have an artifact with the warp.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a bunch of removal. Some focused on more expensive removal here. There's 2 orbital plunges, which makes me think that he wanted to make sure that the early turns are dedicated to building up a board. So you go like maybe a 1-drop into a 2-mana dork, into a turn 4 Spellcraft Mechan, the 3/4 that can sacrifice one of the earlier played artifacts and become big. And once it becomes big, you start jamming with it, and you only focus on killing the large creatures that opponents will drop your way, and hopefully the 4/5 will carve the path into the victory. And maybe, with the help of the signpost that can put some counters on it on top of that. And there's also a couple of those mechan assemblers, the 4/4s that will make robots whenever artifact enters the battlefield, that can build a wider board of 2/2s. And then again, you're worried about bigger creatures, so you focus on the removal for those bigger creatures. Okay, red-white space stations. Well, as the enablers for this. So first of all, the signpost is a very interesting card in my opinion. And I don't know how it will play. I have no idea if it's going to be good or not. I just know that it's a very interesting concept in general. Sami Ship's Engineer is a 4-mana 2/4 in Boros. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 2 or more tapped creatures, create a tapped 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token. Interesting, because I don't think it's realistic to think that you can attack your opponent and have your creatures survive on curve with Sami's Ship's Engineer in your hand that you can play post-combat. Which means that early in the game, it can only be active if you tap your creatures in some other way. And of course, what is the easiest way of tapping things? Stations. Red-white is supposed to be space stations as an archetype. So I assume... And yes, of course, you can use the green card to activate your Boros card in your Boros deck. Exactly. But I guess that if you have Genie in your deck, it can be as well Boros. That you don't care. It's just 10 Forest Boros. But there's plenty of those spacecrafts lying around that can be used to tap something, and maybe that's the way. Other ways you can do that is maybe you have evasion, and then evasive creatures will go through and tap, and they are not dead because they evaded blockers, and because of that you can build your board. But I think the interesting dynamics of that card is that you can play some cards, spells, some creatures, play a spacecraft, and then tap the creatures to the spacecraft, get the robot from Sami Ship's Engineer, and you put the shields down for a turn. But hopefully you can then get your spacecraft online as a creature, which will become much, much bigger and improve your board presence. And the robot will appear. That will make your board much bigger than your opponent's after the turn of having shields down. And I'm wondering how that's going to be working. Someone is playing with their microphone somehow. And I don't know. Oh, that must be Jason.
Sorry.
Because you're the only one that's unmuted. And I don't know if that deck is going to be working, but it sort of puts me on the idea that this is not going to be an aggressive deck. It's going to be more like a control large mana deck. I think that the Zookeeper Mechan might be interesting in that one because it is a mana dork. It's a 1/3 good defensive creature. And yeah, my vision of that deck is it's going to be not your typical Boros aggressive deck. It's going to be something drastically different from it, like more like a Boros control, sort of. And with that, let's move on to I assume, Tresio's visions of the deck.
Yeah, that's exactly the same place that I ended up with this. The interesting thing to me is that the signpost on common here is much better at going wide than anything in black-white was doing. I mean, you're generating it, like you said, Sirkovitz. That doesn't mean you can like attack with a bunch of creatures and have them tapped and then generate a 2/2 and that kind of a thing. But you're liable to end up with a fairly wide board, but in the process of doing what you're trying to do here. And you notice that this has been built for control. So our 1-drops are meant to eliminate opponents' 1 and 2 drops. We're playing the 1-drop O-ring that will get rid of those things. Like that's something we'd like to be doing potentially on turn 1 if we're on the draw, our turn 1, and something we don't mind doing on turn 3 as like a double spell kind of a thing. And then you notice that we have the Poker Squadron Ace and the Starfighter Pilots, like things that care about tapping and enabling spacecraft, and we're going to get to those. But the thing that I put on the first slide is I actually struggled to find the spacecraft that this deck wanted. Because even though red-white is called like the space station deck, right? It's not like red and white have these amazing spacecraft that the other colors don't have. And I actually struggled to find them. As a matter of fact, the ones that I found that I would like to have in red and white aren't even rare. And that's nice because that means you maybe have a reliable chance of getting them. And one of them is in the bottom right there. The Galvanizing Saw Ship, I think, is a great target for this deck. 6 mana, 6/5 with flying and haste, and notice what its station cost is. Only 3. Your chances on turn 6 of having 3 power sitting around somewhere are awfully high, and the ability to just have a 6/5 flying haste out of nowhere. And if you have, it's uncommon. You could have like 2 or 3 of them in this deck, and then all of a sudden you're causing significant problems. If I were thinking about like what rare station would I want to pick, or would this deck like to hunt down? I again had a lot of trouble finding that outside of splashing, which this deck really doesn't want to do, even though red can create some landers if you really need to. But the Extinguisher Battleship is a great target. Again, I'm trying to find things that can just end the game when they come in, because you already have the board, the power on the board to station them. And this one doesn't have haste. But there are a couple of red cards that can tap to give haste and things like that. And the battleship coming in as a flying trample 10/10, and potentially wiping the board of things that your opponents are going to care about a lot more than you. I mean, that's a board wipe with also destroy their biggest thing. Destroy, their biggest, most annoying thing, and then deal 4 damage to everything else. One of the things to remember about Spacecraft is that Spacecraft can station other spacecraft, just like vehicles can crew other vehicles, except when stations are doing that.
Once they're creatures, yeah, obviously.
Yeah, but I mean, for example, imagine your Saw Ship comes in and you tap 3 power, and then it's got flying and haste. It can now put 6 counters on something if you want it to. That's an interaction to be aware of, and obviously what it's enabling is permanently affixed in the form of counters. So basically what this deck is trying to do is control the game in, like, say, turns 1 through 4 or 5. You notice we're playing the 2 Radiant Strikes at 4 mana. They're going to turn something sideways potentially.
Radiant Strike is the 4 mana instant that destroys tapped creature or an artifact. That doesn't have to be tapped. And you gain 3 life at instant
Right.
speed.
So you're getting rid of their spacecraft later in the game. You're maybe getting rid of their aggressive attacker earlier in the game. You're playing the ship's engineer, and then you're playing one of these spacecraft. Rescue Skiff is the white spacecraft that's below rarity, and the Galvanizing Saw Ship is the uncommon red one that we talked about. You're playing that, and then you probably are having creatures on board to be able to get after them. And we've got Flight Deck Coordinator, the 3 mana 3/3 in white, that if you control 2 or more tapped creatures, you gain 3 life at the beginning of your end step. So that's helping to keep you alive. You've got Pulsar Squadron Ace, the 1/2 for 2 in white, that is letting you look at your top 5 cards and find a spacecraft. So if you're all set up and you just need your spacecraft, that's great. And if not, there's your 2 mana 2/3 Sirkovitz that it becomes if you did not put a card in your hand that way. If you need the 2/3 as a good blocker early in the game more than you need the spacecraft, you can have it.
I mean, I'm foreseeing that so many times in this format I'm going to fail to find, even if I saw this spaceship.
Well, if it's early, right? I mean, it's a card that's got value here early and value late. If you're playing it on turn 6 and you want the spacecraft,
definitely,
you can go and get it. And notice that this deck is also playing the Pinnacle Kill Ship that Sam brought up earlier. I think that's a perfectly fine, 7 mana 7/7 flyer to be a big threat. So yeah, I think that, for example, I would rather play and draft into this deck off of picking like a really good, let's say, white rare spacecraft, pack 1, pick 1. I would rather end up here than end up in the white black deck that we saw earlier. I think this is better supported.
So just a question: system override. Are you playing it to activate your own spaceships out of nowhere, or are you
exactly? I mean, I think that's something that's going to get lost on this card. Is you can absolutely gain control of your own spacecraft and put 10 counters on it. And,
the systems override is the threaten effect in the format, and it has the option of you can gain control and untap target spacecraft and put 10 charge counters on it, and those charge counters will go away at the end of turn. But if you have a big spaceship on board, you can just cast it, remove, put the counters on it for one turn, one shot the opponent, and then it becomes stationary again.
Right. Or you steal their thing that's getting in the way of your big spacecraft attacking. And I think it's got a lot, the fact that it's got a couple of modes here and a lot of utility, I will like to have a copy in this deck.
Yeah, I do think one spacecraft that I'm pretty interested in that you don't have here is the 4-mana 3/4 for flying first strike one that has ETB make a robot like a 2/2, and I think it becomes a creature at 8 or something. Mm-hmm. But I like that it really helps station itself, because you can just tap the 2/2 to it twice, and that gets it most of the way.
Yeah. Okay. White green counters.
Oh, can we skip ahead to the next one, because I want to go soon.
Okay. Yeah.
I for some reason didn't expect our start time to be as late as it was.
Why didn't you not expect it? We always are 1 hour delayed every single time.
I didn't make the slide. I also didn't delete it.
I made the slide. It is just to describe what the. Thank you for not deleting it. This weird respect to my work dedicated to it. Although this one actually was probably done by Tresio, wasn't it?
Nope. This may have been.
Oh no, that was the last one I did. Yeah, that's true. Blue-white is a second spell archetype, so it gets bonuses for casting a second spell. And the signpost uncommon is Station Monitor.
Literally Corey Steelcutter. You heard it here first.
I was thinking more Clarion Spirit, but okay.
No,
Station Monitor, blue and white for a 2/2 Lizard Artificer. White Lizard, bit weird, but okay. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, create a 1/1 colorless drone artifact creature token with flying, and this token can block only creatures with flying. So basically, yeah, every time you cast a second spell, you make a 1/1 flyer that is aggressive rather than defensive. Monitor Lizard, there you go. How do you cast 2 spells a turn? Well, first of all, you need cheap spells. Second of all, you need to draw cards. And I think that cards that I put as enablers, Honor, it's a white mana for a sorcery, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, draw a card. Great to put on your drone artifact pinging small creature with flying. And you draw a card, which makes it more likely that you are going to cast a second spell at some stage. Ilvoy Galeblade, blue for a 1/1 flyer with flash, and you can sacrifice it to draw a card. Cheap, so you can cast it cheaply. Flash, so you can cast it on the opponent's turn, so you can trigger your second spell synergies on the opponent's turn. And you have things like Execute Savior, 3 mana 2/2 with flying. When it enters, you can return up to 1 target permanent you control to its owner's hand. So you can return something cheap, replay it, and get the trigger from casting 2 spells. There are also payoffs, and I think that the most dominant payoffs is one is Gigastorm Titan, 5 mana 4/4 in blue, but it costs 3 less if you've cast another spell this turn. So you can, turn 3, you cast a 1-drop, and you cast a 4/4 for 2 mana, which is quite a good deal. I think it's a solid card if you can enable early. It's not that great if you draw it late. So it's going to be like a very opening hand win rate kind of a card. And we have Sunstar Lightsmith, which is actually quite good late game. This is a 4 mana 3/3. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and you draw a card. So this can be the engine that gets you late in the game by casting double spells. And you have minor synergy things. Bright Spear Zealot. It's a 3 mana 2/4 with Vigilance, which is actually not a terrible stat line for a creature. Especially Vigilance with Spacecrafts is pretty good because you can attack, and after attack you can crew your spaceship. But it also gets +2/+0 as long as you cast 2 spells, 2 or more spells this turn. So it becomes a 4/4 Vigilance creature for 3 mana, which is not terrible. And yeah, that is a sort of that is how I envisioned it. But obviously, Gene Pollinator can help you casting 2 spells, I guess.
Yeah,
I guess,
exactly.
I guess you can make it a banned deck because why?
Well,
wouldn't
okay,
you?
no. So okay, it's wilder than that. Because it involves a mythic. I was just looking through the card file and I was like looking through things that. I was looking for ways to make this Exosuit Savior card work. Right, that's the Exosuit Savior, cool card, right? It's like one of those like pixie effects. You pick up something, you get nice value, and it's especially nice with Cryogen Relic. But you know what's even nicer with? Weft Walking. This is the 6 mana mythic for 4 blue. When it enters, you wheel yourself. So you shuffle your hand and graveyard into your library, then draw 7. And and both players get like the first spell you cast on your turn. Can be cast without paying its mana cost, like Omniscient style.
I mean,
right?
why is it not a Spider-Man card called Everybody Gets One?
I don't know what that means. I don't know anything about Spider-Man. Either way, so I mean, it's a pretty strong card. Like it could be a 6 mana draw 7, and then you get to use the omniscience effect before your opponent does. But you know what makes it better?
No, you can't get it. They will get it first.
Yeah, because you look at it first because you've cast the spell this turn. Never mind, sure. Either way, you know what makes it even better? If you can cast it and then immediately pick it up with an Exosuit Savior. So that your opponent doesn't get the Omniscience effect. And you can cast another draw 7 later. So I was thinking that's interesting. That's a very interesting reason to want to be blue-white with this Exosuit Savior, as opposed to, I believe a lot of the good effects to go with it are in black, like Virus Beetle and the 3 mana -3/-3 at uncommon. But blue white has another good target for this Exosuit Savior card, which next slide is the Cryogen Relic, because it's a draw 2, because it triggers when it leaves the battlefield, not just when it's sacrificed. So picking it up also triggers it, which is really nice. You can just curve. It's a really natural curve too. Like turn 2 Relic, turn 3 Savior. You've now just drawn. You've casted Divination plus a 2/2 flyer, which is pretty nice. You also get the
literally Muldrifter.
Yeah, basically, yeah. You just cast a Muldrifter across the first 2 turns. There's also the Sibstic Appraiser card, Codecracker Hound, which is another draw 2, where we talked about how you probably on turn 3 are most games going to just cast it on its front side, not warp it, right? And just because you likely want some way to affect the board. But if in the late game you have one of these lying around, like say on turn 6, you might just play your Exosuit Savior, pick up the Hound, and then just warp the Hound, because at this point I maybe don't need to trade it off as much. I can just play it again next turn. It'll be fine. And that's just another way in blue to let your Exosuit Saviors be more like divinations, which is really, really strong, right? Again, Muldrifter. There's also plenty of ways in whites that you can use plenty of 2-drops in white that have small ETB effects, like making a 1/1, which are completely fine. They're not amazing to pick up with Savior, not as much as the other blue cards or some of the black cards, but they're still serviceable, like the Knight Captain or the boosters, which work together well. The 2 mana for 2 1/1s and the 5 mana flying equipment that makes a creature on ETB. And of course I have a bunch of green stuff here, mostly because I don't know, everything gets better with green. But also because I like the card Starfield Shepherd, the 5 mana 3/2 flyer in white that gets either a plains or a 1-drop, and you can warp it for 2. But the problem is that there's not that many good 1-drops in white and blue, but there is a good 1-drop in green.
Let me guess. It's an insect.
What, the 1-drop?
Yeah.
I don't actually know what the types on Gene Pollinator are. As far as I know, it's an elf with reach.
It is an insect.
But yeah, so that was basically what inspired me to build into this. Is just I think the card Exosuit Savior can be quite powerful, especially in blue white. Obviously, you talked about how it like enables like double spelling as well, which is pretty valid. But I think it can just be a pretty powerful card advantage piece, and it's really funny with weft walking.
Yeah, I will definitely not. I didn't think about that combo because I forgot that the time twister is actually one-sided. So getting it multiple times is actually very beneficial because you can deploy like a bunch of cards.
Also, notably, like, it's not usually time twisters exile themselves, but this one doesn't.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely.
It's important to note though that you do have to really hope that you're going to draw, the savior in the 7 cards that you draw, because your hand is involved in the shuffling.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true.
So density of saviors, I think, is particularly important here. Like 3 or 4, you're very happy.
Yeah, but theoretically, you're casting in the late game where you've probably, you've played a bunch of lands out of your deck. You might have a bunch of things in play. Who knows, right? Like, I'm just noting that it's a very amusing.
You might as well start with casting a free spell that does something. And also, there is a slight non-bow with casting the weft walking and then pull through the weft is not good with weft walking.
Well, I mean, on the contrary, maybe you for example, maybe you've cast a bunch of Codecracker Hounds, right? Like on turn 3, you cast a Codecracker Hound, and on turn 6, you went Savior, pick up your Hound, replay your Hound, and then on turn 7, you can pull through. Maybe you milled over a weft walking because you didn't want it yet, but now you've cast pull through a weft, back your weft walking, and also put 2 lands back into play.
Yeah. I'm more thinking after weft walking, pull through the weft is a bit dead.
Yeah, but okay. You also don't need to in the same turn cast weft walking. I think weft walking is just a good card where you it's a draw 7. Your opponent gets to cast something for free, but then on your turn you cast something for free, and the fact that you just drew 7 cards makes casting things for free more impactful. So
Okay. That is definitely something I did not think about before. And that's the kind of insights you're getting for inviting a diverse cast, because diversity is a strong, powerful feature of any team.
Especially
with extra diversity of opinions, you get broader overview. So expose yourself to bloody diverse opinions, because that's useful for you. Damn it.
Especially in this set, diversity of lands can be important too, as we saw with the other deck I built. Anyway,
you mean all 5?
Yeah, all 17. That should be an achievement.
If Jason has the time, would you be willing to go to Black Red next? I would be curious to hear Jason's comments, because the Black Red archetype was exactly built from the bottom up idea of take a card and build around it. So you can intro and then I'll show.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, generally,
I don't know if I do have the time. I will say, Virulent Silencer was a card I was considering trying to build around, but I wanted to play it in blue with the equipment that makes things unblockable.
Okay.
But, I do need to head out, I believe, because it is getting late.
All right, then give yourself a shout out, and I will try to do the best to replace both Jason and Sam in giving comments.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You can find me in places normally under Jason ILTG. I'm going to trying to make more content again after having been somewhat on break from Magic for a bit. But yeah, hopefully everything I said was insightful. And may you crack very many survey mechans in the future. Bye.
Bye. Right, we go to the end part of the podcast when we have Black Red. The theme should be Void, and Void is the mechanic we talked about. If something was warped or left the battlefield this turn on either side of the battlefield, you get extra value. And the Signpost Interceptor Mechan is actually a very strong card. 2 black-red for a 2/2 flyer. It has the Gravedigger effect, so it can return target artifact or creature, so it's even better than the Gravedigger, from your graveyard to your hand. And Void at the beginning of your end step. If a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn, a spell was warped this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. I guess the common play pattern will be turn 4, you attack with your board. Something gets traded off in that attack. You played Interceptor Mechan, return the thing that you lost, put a counter on the Mechan. You got a 3/3 that drew you a card, which is with flying, which is not a bad thing, and it threatens to be growing continuously after that.
Well, or you just warp something, which I think is going to happen.
Oh yeah, well, you won't happen on turn 4 then, but yeah. And then you have a bunch of enablers. You got like cheap creatures that can die and make more permanents, like Beamsaw Prospector. You got Embrace Oblivion, the Bone Splinters variant that will force you to sacrifice something that will naturally trigger Void and then kill something, which also triggers Void. You got Melded Moxide, an artifact that you can sacrifice for an effect, and again, to get more bodies. So it's basically Tormenting Voice and an artifact. And then after you've done your Tormenting Voice, you can sacrifice it for 3 mana and create a 2/2 robot that triggers Void, basically. And you got some payoffs. So you got the Coercion that costs 2 less if Void was triggered. So it turns into a Thoughtseize that doesn't ping you for 2. You got the Void Forge Titan, a 5 mana 5/4 that at the end of your turn, if Void was triggered, you draw a card and lose 1 life. But I guess we're not going to be talking about the canonical build of this deck. So tell me about it.
You can go one slide further, I think. Yeah, so I would call this black-red artifact synergy, but this was a build around a Virulent Silencer. I'm a poison counter lover, and right when I saw this card, I thought, well, how possible is this to do?
What does the card do, one might ask?
Yeah. 3 mana colorless card, 2/3 artifact creature. Whenever a non-token artifact creature you control deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. So
Okay.
whenever, not once per turn, right? I mean, do this 5 times and you're very happy, right? So non-token means you don't get to do this with like the little 2/2 robot tokens flying around, or like the 1/1s that the blue signpost makes. You have to do it with legitimate creatures. But there are 34 artifact creatures in this set that are not tokens. And so there's plenty of them around, and there's a lot of them in black-red. So that's what this show is built around. And it's not only built around the fact that they're artifact creatures, but we want them to hit. So therefore, we want some kind of evasion or some kind of attack ability coming out of them. So we have the 2 1-mana Hull Carvers that are the 1/1 Death Touch artifact creatures. Your opponent has to choose whether to block them or whether to let them through. But they've got Death Touch, so you create annoying blocking choices. You've got Virus Beetle in here because another way to create evasion is you just play a small game where there's not a lot of blockers sitting around, and then all of a sudden you have one thing that they can't block and they're getting 2 poison counters, right? So Virus Beetle is keeping the game a little bit small. And then you have the 2/2 where you can pay to put a counter on it when another artifact enters. You notice in this build there's tons of artifacts all over the place, so it has the ability to grow and become more of a threat as you get bigger. As many Virulent Silencers as you can get, obviously, because they are themselves artifact creatures. So why wouldn't you want more than one? I mean, if you're ever getting a turn where one thing hits and you're getting 4 poison counters for that one hit, you're extremely happy, right? And then the signpost on common here becomes incredibly important, because if your opponent sees what you're trying to do, then they want to kill your silencers, and then what you'd like to do is get your silencers back. So if you play your silencer on 3 and then your opponent kills it right away, you play Mechan on 4 and get your silencer back. And another really important thing about the Mechan is the Mechan can get itself back, so it plays really well in multiples. And then I have the 6 mana 4/4 that is very good at enabling attacks. And oh, by the way, it's an artifact creature that's a 4/4 flyer, so that's pretty great. And then things that decks that are kind of key around one card really need is an alternate plan. And that alternate plan comes in the form of there's a lot of artifact creatures in here that enable haste. You notice one of the rares that I put in is Tannic, which is the 2 red creature, the rare creature that creatures it's either creatures or artifact creatures you control come in and have haste. I'm just going to double check that. But that's the main purpose of that card is so that everything is coming in hasty. So if you get a hasty flyer that comes in, like for example, a Signpost Uncommon or the 6 mana 4/4, then it's attacking right away, and maybe you're poisoning them to death or just killing them on damage out of nowhere. But then you notice that I'm also playing the 9 mana Colossus here. And the purpose of the Colossus is if you can warp it in for 3 and give it haste, it's a massive problem, right?
No, not for you, I guess.
What's that?
Not for you, I guess.
No, not for me at all. And that's why we're also playing 2 copies of Full Bore. That's the 1 mana, 1 red mana trick that gives target creature +3/+2 until end of turn. And if it was warped, which by the way you might want to do with your 9/9, then it gets trample and haste until end of turn. So all of a sudden you have a 4 mana 12/11 trample haste that you're picking it up, but you kind of don't care because you just erased half of their life. And the other rare that I'm playing here is Terminal Velocity, because Colossus plus Terminal Velocity is tons of fun. It's a board wipe in a box kind of a thing. So you see that combo there. Terminal Velocity for 6 mana. You may put an artifact or creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. It gains haste. So you play Colossus for 6 kind of. You give it haste. And then when it leaves the battlefield, so no matter what happens, they kill it, they exile it, they bounce it. It doesn't matter. It does 9 damage to everything. And so that's kind of the alternate plan here, which is very easy to just slip into the deck because of all the artifact synergies, is you're playing the silencers, basically as many as you can to try to poison them to death. Every artifact creature, you can now think of every artifact creature dealing 4 to them because it's adding 2 poison counters, which is 1/5 of what you need to kill them. Plays great in multiples, and then you have the Colossus nonsense, plus just like the circuit feeders at the top end that are just good cards that can enable an attack that can, get the last points of damage through and win. This is something I will be actively looking to do. And Silencer being an uncommon means that you have a reasonable chance of being able to pick up a couple of them in some of your drafts.
Yeah, one warning I'm going to give to the listeners is that my experience of observing the 17 lands data shows me that people love poison counter kills, and that might be a knock against this card that lots of people will be just trying to do that as well. So make sure that you find open lane for the silencers.
Yeah.
And then maybe. But definitely you're going to be advantage over an average arena player if you are listening to Tresio's plan. So that's definitely going to help.
Well, and an important thing too is, suppose you start building the pieces for this and then you don't see the silencers. This is not a terrible deck. And the fact you have tons of artifacts that are going to grow those 4/4, those 4 mana signpost flyers. It's coming in as a 2/2 flyer. We already talked about it's somewhat reasonable. It'll be a 3/3 flyer at the end of your turn. And then if that thing continues to grow, it's a real problem. And especially if you have multiples and you can recur it, you could reasonably try for a shell like this. And if you don't end up with the silencers, you have other things you can do.
So be it. Also, keep in mind, black and red has a lot of, you didn't put any in the deck, or not much at least, but it has tons of good interaction. You can build it as a tempo deck that you drop a bunch of creatures early, you have cheap interaction. Those Pangolins are perfect with cheap interaction because, you play Pangolin, you play some kind of a flimsy 1-drop, you pump the Pangolin, you still have mana to play shock and kill the other 2-drop and start jamming. And you will force your opponent to kill that Pangolin eventually, which means you can reanimate it with the Mechan and put another threat, and Pangolin becomes and it goes on. I think it's a very solid deck. It does remind me of how Black-Red was in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty in a way. Plus, you have this alternative plan that you have here. But it can be a different alternative plan. You can put the there is a 2/3 with impact tremors for creatures and artifacts as well. That's another plan that you can enforce there, just by playing a bunch of artifacts and pinging your opponent to death while having some kind of evasive threats that will do the rest of the damage.
Yeah, there's actually a couple of turn 4, turn 5 infinite combos that have been.
Oh yeah, there is also that. There are infinite combos. Let's not dwell into that. Let's leave it to the commanders players to.
Yeah, but I will say that out of the 3 Mardu colored decks that I built, for our podcast here. This was, I think this is definitely the strongest. There's, like you said, there's lots of different ways it can go and be built. There's lots of support for it, and
I think it can be built in many ways as well.
Yeah. So think of black red as artifact matters, artifact synergy, and you'll go some good places, I think.
And do enjoy animal wrestling. We can see in the background. We've had multiple sightings of animals in this stream, because I know that Sam's dog was appearing at some stage. And the last one we have,
my greyhound has the zoomies behind us, and when greyhounds get the zoomies, it is
fast.
Big thing. Yeah, very fast.
I mean, aren't greyhounds like 20 hours a day sessile and 4 hours a day insane?
Yeah, that's very true. Breeders call them the world's fastest couch potato. They expend massive amounts of energy and go like 48 miles an hour, and then they sleep for 4 hours.
Yeah, but makes sense. If I could, I do the same without the 48 miles an hour part. So, you know. Okay, I think it's the last one, is it?
I think so.
Well, the last deck we have is red-green, the worst deck of Final Fantasy. Is it going to be the worst deck also here? I don't know. It is built based on landfall and landers, so very much like in the previous one, at least on paper. The signpost is Tanuk Memorial Ensign, and I'm going to use the British pronunciation just because I'm not going to use the American one.
Ensign.
Ensign. It's British, English as ensign, and British invented that language, so it's ensign. Thank you very much. I won't take further questions. I know it's ensign in American. It's 3 mana for a 2/4. It has landfall. Whenever land you control enters, Tanuk deals 1 damage to each opponent. So it's basically a saboteur from the previous set, but instead of being a 2/1, it's a 2/4, and it doesn't have reach. But wait, there is more. If it's the second time this ability is resolved this turn, draw a card. And that's actually a big game. With all the landers tokens, you can get double landfall routinely, and 3 mana 2/4 that draws you a card is a pretty solid deal.
Well, and especially important because with it being a legendary creature, you're not getting multiples on the board. You're not going to burn them out with this damage either.
Oh yeah, no, definitely not. It's just an addition, but it's a solid body with potential of being absolutely great if you can draw that 1 card. And important cards for that kind of deck is something that makes your landers. So Sammy's Curiosity we mentioned, Galactic Wayfarer, the 3/3 that makes a lander that we mentioned. There is also like Cav Landseeker, the 4 mana 4/3 Menace, which actually is not a terrible body either, and it does make a lander on ETB, but the problem is that that lander will disappear at the end of your next turn, so you have to use it relatively quickly. A bunch of other things. Use Social Engineering as a payoff. I think that it's a very interesting card. This is the Chocobo Racetrack version for this set. 5 mana for an enchantment, landfall. Whenever land you control enters, you create a 2/2 robot artifact creature token. But it does have warp for 2 mana. And I think that, it's not unreasonable to warp it on turn 4, play your land, make a 2/2, use the 2 mana to sacrifice a lander, get a land, make another 2/2. So for 4 mana, you ramped yourself and you made 2 2/2s. And then you can untap next turn, play one more land, and you get 3 2/2s. That's basically Imperial Oath for you. So I think that this is actually a quite powerful card that maybe people will not treat seriously because the Chocobo Racetrack was not great. I think that the warp option on it is actually quite a significant upgrade.
Well, and one of the big payoffs I think that is not pictured here is the green uncommon Spacecraft is great here with a ton of the cards that you list here. The Larval Scoutlander, that's the 2 and a green 3/3 Spacecraft.
You sacrifice a permanent, and then you can put sacrifice a land or a lander,
right? And
you get 2 lands on board.
So imagine 2 land triggers, even if you don't have a land drop that turn for like Tanuk, and you're dealing a damage and drawing a card, and how that's interacting with a number of the different things here. That's pretty great.
Yeah, pretty great. But okay, let's talk about this build. Is that yours or?
No, I think this was Sam's.
Okay, so it's simple, so I can handle it. I think that's the idea. And Sap agrees with me that social engineering might be an important card, as it is highlighted on the first slide, along with territorial Bruntar, which is a 6-mana 6/6 reach, and it has a landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, exile the cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card, and you may cast this card this turn, which is fun because normally those things that exile from the top will exile land or non-land. This one only will exile non-land, which means you want to play your territorial Bruntar on turn 6, tap out completely, and next turn hope you untap with it, play a land, and you got a spell for free. So that's quite a powerful ability if it survives, obviously. Bunch of other cards in this deck. There is some interaction. Biosynthetic Burst, that's the green combat trick, defensive, offensive. It does all the things that green combat tricks do. So it puts a counter on something. That creature gains reach and trample and indestructible until end of turn, and you untap it. So use it offensively, use it defensively. Also, it has diplomatic relations, a controversial card because
public service announcement time.
Yeah, public service announcement time. This card has errated already before the set's release. Original text says target creature gets +1/+0 and gains vigilance until end of turn. It deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls. Now, with this wording, you could target your opponent's creature and it could eat itself. However, as the card is worded in Gatherer now and how it's been errated and how it will be looking on Arena, it says target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains vigilance until the turn, blah, blah, blah. The rest stays the same.
Prepare for the pre-release misunderstandings now.
Oh, there's got to be so much of them. And I think that our pre-release will have an announcement before based on that card. So yeah, this is like a good interaction spell. It's basically clear shot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or Huatli's.
And there's some more of that instant speed removal, like we talked about. If your opponent has that work creature that they keep replaying and replaying and replaying, and they're getting value out of it, especially if it's one of the rare ones that's getting a ton of value.
Yeah.
The ability to instant speed removal is going to be very important.
Yeah, and there's plenty of that where it came from. And deck is sort of like looking mid-rangey. Obviously, there's one Gene Pollinator because I think that they will put any number of Gene Pollinators in their decks, those two. But it looks like mid-range kind of value pile rather than hyper-aggressive deck. It has cards like the what is Siege Ship? Agrarian. Yeah, I'm sorry. I have to read from a small screen and I'm blind, which comes with an age. Don't worry, it will come to you as well.
That's the one that when you tap it, you create a lander, correct?
Yeah, that's the one when you tap it, you create a lander. And this card also can have interesting things. Like you can cast it early, tap it for something, maybe Spaceship, maybe Gene Pollinator, create a lander. If you untap with it, you can play a land. Whenever land comes into play, this creature gets a +1/+1 lander. So you can play a land, make it a 4/4, attack with it, and if opponent blocks, you have 2 landers out of it right now. You can sacrifice those 2 landers, get 2 more land triggers, and it becomes 6/6. So it can grow very quickly and generate value as it does because you get those landers. So looks quite powerful as a card.
I cannot stress enough how much you want multiple copies of that Larval Scoutlander Spacecraft in this deck. I mean, I want you to just picture this curve that you play a 2-drop that creates a lander. You play the Scoutlander on 3 that when it enters, it sacks a lander and then puts two lands on the battlefield tapped. I mean, they said green-blue is ramp. This has a potential for mega ramp here. I mean, Imagine you're playing that on 3, right? And now what? On turn 4, you have 6 lands. Yeah. And now you're playing Bruntar. You're playing Bruntar on turn 4. That's so massive. Or you play like Apparatus on 4, right? And then all of a sudden you're tapping it to station the Spacecraft that you just played on 3, right? You have a reason to tap it. It creates another lander. And that Scoutlander Spacecraft is not legendary. You may have multiple of them coming in all over the place. You can get really, really big mana really fast.
Yeah, and there's also like a couple of 2-drops that are, well, one of them is here, I think. But the other one is not, that are quite powerful that only I think this deck will want. There is one that is 2 mana 2/1, and when it enters, your opponent chooses whether they make it a 4/3 or give you 2 landers. Neither of those choices is a particularly fun to make. So I think it's going to be a very powerful 2-drop. And the other one is 2 mana 0/4 with landfall. It gets +2/+0 until end of turn, which means early in the game it's just a 2/4/4/2, which is great rate for an aggressive creature. So
well, and there's even the 2 mana green 2/3 that has landfall. When a land enters, you gain 1 life.
Yeah, that's more of a it is technically a defensive card, but hey, it does offense pretty well as well.
I mean, in this deck, you're reasonably gaining 5-6 life off of that card. And a 2/3 is a good stat line in this format.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I'm very keen. And also 1 2-drop that I think Sam is putting in this deck is the oh god, and I can't read it even. I'll have to really zoom in to see the name of it. Intrepid. Help, Tresio. Maybe you have better eyes. You don't have glasses at least.
Intrepid Tenderfoot.
Intrepid Tenderfoot. It's just a 2 mana 2/2. But it has 3 mana, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, activate as a sorcery. No limit how many times per turn you want to do that. I think that this is going to be an excellent 2-drop in this deck as well, because yes, early is just a 2/2. Later, it's a great mana sink, and it can grow in a hurry, and you draw it late, you don't care because you have mana to actually do something with it. So I think that it has a lot of 2-drops that become excellent, but only in this particular deck, which makes me quite optimistic about the red-green, honestly. And it is one of those decks that seems to be doing exactly what it says on the tin, and that's also refreshing in this format. So, yeah. All right. I think we got there. Chat, we got there. Yeah, I didn't create a single skeleton, as I am not doing that anymore. I'm just moderating other people because I think you hear me enough on this podcast, and it's great to get opinions of other people and get their vision. And me as a moderator is also working fine because
we're missing a few links here too. Obviously, I mean, there's some that we talked about that are not in here. We'll make sure that the links get
this is a living document, so don't worry. I'm probably going to put it somewhere tomorrow on my Patreon so you can access to it and you can look through the slides, see better, maybe zoom in so you can read the card names or click on the links to see how the decks are built. And if I have something to offer to you as an advice, play around yourself. Try to build your archetypes and see how they look differently from me. What I also do, and that's another feature that 17 Lands has to offer, I do a lot of mock drafts early in the format before I start touching the cards. And those mock drafts are rubbish. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to build perfect decks, and I'm definitely doing lots of mad things. But mock drafts put me in circumstances where I have to improvise and think about decks while I'm building them rather than while I'm looking at the spoiler. It gets me up to date with the cards, and it makes me see the interactions between cards often that I would miss just by looking at the spoiler. So I highly recommend getting to use that 17 lands mock draft feature and trying your strength in trying to predict what's going to be good. All right. Thanks for watching. You can find our guests here. Tresio, do you have something specifically you want to plug? You already did it at the beginning, but some people were not there.
Yeah, I'll just mention it again for those that weren't there at the beginning. I will very likely be streaming early access on Wednesday, so you can come and catch me there, and we'll be experimenting with some things. I do tend to focus on sealed as much as possible in early access because I find that there's less content for it, and people are preparing for pre-release. So I'm going to be doing sealed and building sealed pools. It also gives more time to talk through deck construction and things like that. So feel free to join me for that on Wednesday.
Don't worry, we're not ageist. We won't hold it against you. Yeah, and of course, thanks to couple of people that are really helping us to do this stream. First of all, Adam, DDVAP, who is working behind the scenes but never can join because he has a growing family, busy life, and cannot join on stream, but does a lot of help in the background. Zach, Kagan, and Springbok, who were supposed to be here, but unfortunately the plans sort of fizzled out, but they'd also always participate in the skeleton crew. Big thanks for the sealeddeck.tech, who are giving us the tool to build those skeletons, and visit sealeddeck.tech to actually try your own skeletons. It's very easy to build them there because all the spoiler is already in there, and you can use it. Obviously, thanks to 17 Lands, which are, well, helping with all the content that physically is there and can help you with those draft simulations if you want to do those. And with that, I'll see you next week, probably on Saturday next week. Oh no, I will see you next week, maybe for some kind of early impressions, and then we're probably going to go for like Saturday week after that for the early data already. Happy times! But till then, enjoy what you can. Enjoy your pre-release. Enjoy your early access if you're so lucky. I am so lucky. I'm not going to stream it because my computer dies when I try to stream early access, because streaming from a PC emulated on a Mac is a problem. I can tell you that. But I will play, and I will get some ideas of how the format is working, and hopefully we'll try to make an episode based on that to bridge this gap between the pre-release and when the data becomes available. Thank you very much for being here, and Tresio, thank you very much for being a good sport and helping with the slides and helping me until the end, unlike some who are only interested in decks that can contain Pollinator, which also is all 10 color in their opinion. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.